How are you?
Nervous, but okay, thank you.
Are you really?
Yes.
Now,
You?
is that a little bit?
Yeah.
But it isn't as if we've never met, because we did meet once.
We did meet in a dingy hotel room.
Right. So you're Jack Lemmon.
Yes. And you're Fred Astaire. Or is it Orson Welles?
I'm not Fred Astaire. Yoko, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good, good, okay. Is there anything that you want to know about me to start off with that we could, just to sort of get
What do you do for a living?
To get the... actually, this is my profession.
I know you lived here.
Yeah, I practically do. I hardly ever get out of here. The chair collapses into a bed, and
it must be hard.
It's a bad. Do you have my kind of show
In England.
all over the world? I mean,
Yeah,
you've
they're
been
not
everywhere.
quite as good, you know.
They what?
They're not quite as good in England at repartee, you know.
Why is this?
Well, they're more inhibited, that's all.
The
You know, they don't have anybody that would sort of freak out a little.
Yeah.
Unless Jerry Rubin comes on, you know.
Oh yeah, Rubin came over and disrupted a show done by I can never think of the guy's name.
David Dost?
David Drost.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was very exciting.
Yeah, it was a very exciting show, actually.
What actually happened? They came in and broke up the studio.
They broke up the studio, and David ended up in the audience to show that he wasn't with the young people, you know, which shows where he is at, really.
Out
Nothing
there.
personal, David, wherever you are, red light.
You
Right.
know, I had a terrible feeling that my hair was going to be longer than yours. It's a funny thing, because I met you the other day. The recent pictures I'd seen of both of you, yours is extremely long, Yoko, and yours, John, was very long. And of course, people going around saying, I can't tell which one is which and all. You know,
Yes.
that sort of
Well,
witticism.
last year I cut mine. We both cut it right off down to about a quarter of an inch, 69 or 70, I can't remember, because I just suddenly realised it wasn't functional, you know, to have it. When I had it down here, you just have to keep washing it and combing it. You know.
Yeah.
So then I chopped it all off, and then it just grew a bit, and then I just let it grow to this length.
What's your favorite length, Yoko? Are you at it right now?
Well, it depends, you know. We like change, and we just don't want to stick to one.
Who wants the same old haircut every day, you know?
That's
Have a different one every few months. You know?
That's my feeling. Did you save the hair?
Oh yeah.
By any chance?
One time we cut it, we gave it to some Michael Malik, who was running a sort of black house in London, which wasn't exactly a Black Panther thing, but I think it was something to do with it. And they were just having a community centre in London, and we sort of symbolically gave it them. They were going to auction it off at wherever you auction hair off, you know.
Yeah.
That's quite nice.
That big place in London, I can't remember the name.
Sotheby's?
Yeah, that's it. It never happened though, but it was a symbolic gesture, really.
So you don't.
Solidarity. Dim.
And that hair today then is missing.
Gone tomorrow. Silly, isn't it? Oh, you're going to do this all the
we spent
time.
this much time there.
It's gone already.
Yoko, do you have fun when you're over here in this country?
Oh, yes, very much. Because after all, this is my second hometown.
Yeah.
She lived here for 10 years.
People are surprised. They often say she speaks very good English. But you've been here a lot.
But some people ask me, well, can you speak Japanese? And then I get very offended, you know, because
Can you
I am
speak Japanese? Yeah.
You
Now
know.
you've offended her, haven't you?
Get me out of this, John.
Well, funny thing happened on the way in tonight.
It never has to me.
No, me.
Not once in my life.
Nothing happened.
You want to tell him
whatsoever.
about that story, you know, whenever they talk to us and then they're not listening and then you start about that elephant.
Oh,
and all
yeah.
that.
Have you, I suppose you get it, too, when
Private
people
joke
meet
between
you.
us,
You know, like in a restaurant or anywhere, when you're trying to order something, you find that they're so struck by, oh, is it really you, that they don't really hear your order, you know. So when I'm talking to them, I'm saying, I'd like a steak, medium, and 2 elephants came and a policeman bit my head off, and a cup of tea, please. And they're saying, yes, thank you.
It really is like
Because
that.
they're not listening, you know. Probably half of them aren't listening now, which is a good thing, I suppose.
That's a terrible feeling,
Yeah.
to think that they're never listening at all.
Well, it's surreal, you know. I don't mind that.
Have you ever had elephant actually brought to you by someone who was listening?
And bit the policeman's head off quite often, yes. It's an old Anglo custom. You know.
I'll believe anything. You like being over here, I gather. I've had some English guests on. What do you think of yourself as English, first of all? Let's establish that.
Well, sometimes, I mean, if you ask talking about being over here or being over there, then
Over
I think,
here.
well, I'm from over there, you know.
Yeah.
But I normally think in terms of, I suppose I think in cliques and things like other people, like musicians and or long hairs and under 30, over 30, etc., etc. And being married to a Hawaiian, it makes you sort of more international, you know? Sorry about that.
So we sort of
Must be a
kid
mistake
each
in my
other,
notes.
you
Well,
know?
people think of us as, especially in England, not so much here, we get a bit more respect in America as artists, but back home, I think it's the case for all artists, back home it's a bit like, I'm the man that won the pools and lucky guy who had a spot of luck and married a Hawaiian actress, you know, and which isn't true, really. Do you get it?
Kid each other. Because I'm from Japan and he's from England, so somehow we found out that we're sort of passionately patriotic sometimes, you know, and we get, well, no, I mean, that's Japanese made, or no, I mean, you know, English are the first ones to
I mean,
do
we
this
invented
and all
radar
that,
and
you know.
penicillin, you know. But it's a fan turning into a hard hat, you see, when we start discussing, you know, well, we're both islands, and we're both little, and we both did this, and we both did that. And we find ourselves turning quite fascist discussing it.
You do.
Made in Hong Kong and all that.
Yeah. And you do jokes with each other, and you kid her about...
Always laughing, Dick.
Are you? Giggling and laughing?
After
No.
this...
I mean, would you stoop to, you know, Pearl Harbor jokes and that
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
thing?
I do all that. I saw speak English, can I? So, English
Do the
pig.
kabuki thing.
Oh yeah, there's a
You know
kabuki
about
theatre in
kabuki,
Japan,
don't
and they have
I
a
know.
massive stage, and on stage they have the musicians with them, and
You
all
see
the
it
men
only
play the
once,
parts,
though,
you see,
yes.
and all the men play the women's part. They go, "Oh, ting, to, to, ta. Oh, no, no, to, to, to. So that's kabuki, you see. I learned it after only one sitting.
It's very good.
Even
You-
Japanese,
do you know what it is?
They start to laugh when he does that, because it really is Japanese when he does that. I mean, kabuki, you know.
Only our hip
Very
nips will
kabuki.
notice how funny it is, actually.
There are two of them in Utah breaking up right now.
And I've seen one on TV with yellow glasses, and he calls himself the hip nip, and he pretended to be Italian in the war, I remember.
Is
funny,
is
though.
Mr. Lennon putting me on?
I don't know.
Ito-san ni minkai shita no desu ka?
Ah!
Was sind die drei besten Dinge von der ganzen Welt?
Now that we're through making fun of each other's nationalities and other people's, you were saying?
Yes, I just discovered, you know, so John was saying that he discovered that I chain smoke through this article that he was reading about me, you know. Somebody said I chain smoke.
I had noticed
Ah,
before.
is that what it is now? And since then, you know, he never gets off that one. But I just noticed if I'm
What do
lighting
you see?
another
You
one.
see the video that you chain smoke? Oh, smoking kills us, you see.
It is. It does. You know, you're setting a bad example
Didn't
for
work,
adults
John.
all over the world.
Didn't work, Arthur.
Does
talking
that
to
ever
John
happen
Otten.
to you, that you find out something about the other from something you read rather than
Oh,
actually?
sure. I mean, I began to suspect she chain smoked because every time I kiss her, I burnt my chin. But, and then I read it in an article. You
That's
see,
a wonderful delivery you've got. That's
Well,
good.
you know,
Yeah.
back on the boards.
Yeah. But what was I going to say just before that? Do you have any
Something about-
idea? We're talking about
Um,
articles written about you and all
Oh,
that.
yes.
Well, I know where I was.
Yes.
I know where I was.
What's that?
Earlier, I said you seem to like it here because I've had English guests on, British
Yeah,
guests,
that's
who said they come here because they're stifled over there and they can't work and they like the exhilaration here. Then I've had American writers
Yeah.
who have left America because they feel so menaced and threatened that they like the calm of London.
Yeah, well, somebody like Richard Chamberlain went over there and did very well, you know, from going from the soap opera to Hamlet. And vice versa, I suppose people have come over here and broadened the scope. I think it's just a matter of you have a different kind of feeling when you're abroad, you know, maybe you can loosen up. But in Britain we only have 2 channels of TV, and if you watch the old British movies on TV now here, it's the same old men always on TV in Britain still, you know. They have a sort of school of actors. There's about 3 new people got into the profession since I was 10. So it's a bit limiting, you know.
Oh, you do see
Yeah.
all the same old faces.
But the best thing about British TV is the live stuff, you know, like plays and things like that. But it just goes off at 12, you know. So if you have a choice in England of either going out to dinner or watching TV, you can't do both. Like, but with America, it's great. You just sort of wake up and it's on, and you get back after going out for an evening and it's still on. It's beautiful.
It's nice if you're sick.
I love
you know,
it.
You know when you're sick and you're up
I'm
all night.
always sick. That's why I like it so much. According to something I was reading.
British TV is all right, though, in a way. You know, they have also some nice.
Well, it's not bad, my dear.
I'm getting used to British TV more than Japanese TV, of course. You know.
Oh yeah.
I feel British sometimes. You know, that way.
Did your accent change slightly when you were in England?
I don't know.
Yeah.
People tell me that I have Liverpool accent now. And all
She used to have an American accent, being educated here at those funny schools.
Sarah Lawrence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a funny place, isn't it?
I was there.
Do you still have friends from Sarah Lawrence that you're in touch with?
Ah, well, there was one
Not-
turned out
yes,
to be a
yes.
snide. Tell him about that.
A snide?
No, well,
Yes.
you see, a classmate of mine, sort of about 2 years ago, that was when we weren't really that famous that we were together, but
Yeah.
we
It
were
was the
just
first
getting...
article in America on us both
Yes,
since we got together.
it was very important for me,
Yeah, look.
actually, because I was introduced to America through that article, and she was a classmate of mine, so I thought, oh, that's nice. So she came, and I thought, well, you know, since we are friends, so I should cook for her and all that, and I made a nice lunch for her. And then she wrote that, what was it? That,
Oh, she said Yoko looked fat like an old witch cooking. She was 9 months pregnant and just had a miscarriage, and that
I resembled
Ernest Borgnine, you know. Well, you can see that she doesn't. And that was
I mean,
this
I-
old pal
I
that had
liked him and
sneaked
all
in
that,
to
but,
see
you
us.
know.
You do like Ernest
Oh,
Borgnine?
no, no,
Pretext.
I like...
I just want to say
Ernest
Betty
Borgnine.
Rollins' legs.
Was it Betty Rollin who wrote
Yeah.
the article? Oh.
Good old Betty, old pal of Yoko's. Betty
And
Rollins'
then
legs.
she said something about...
Betty Rollins' legs. Okay, I think we can leave that one. It's silly to be so bitter, isn't it?
Oh yes, but there's something about her legs. I never noticed anything wrong with her legs when I was married to her.
Did you? You weren't looking, obviously. She kept them long skirts on all the time.
I was never. In
Were
fact,
you?
as a matter of fact, no, I wasn't.
put
But she
it
wrote an
on.
article recently in which she said I was delicious.
Well, maybe she's had a pill or something.
Right. But do you have? You don't go to reunions at Sarah Lawrence. You were only there about a year, then, I gather.
3 years, actually. Mhm.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to graduate, you know. I was one of those early dropouts. I just felt it was so ridiculous to go another year. I just couldn't stand it. And in those days, people said, well, it's so silly to not graduate, you know, that bit.
Because you'll never get a job.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I was a bit afraid of that, of course.
You never make it. That's what they told me, too.
That if you didn't finish school.
One maths master wrote, you're on the road to failure if he carries on this way.
Do you ever see your old schoolmates?
No, I've seen a few old school friends, not teachers. No.
Yeah.
Most of them dislike me, except for one or two, you know. So I am always glad to remind them
Was there ever a
of
teacher
their
that?
own incredible awareness they had.
Was there ever a teacher who did inspire you?
Yes,
or
there was always one teacher in each school that would usually be an art teacher or an English language or literature kind of thing. If there's anything to do with writing or art, I was okay at it. Anything to do with science or maths, I just couldn't get it in, you know.
Yeah.
So, but most subjects were science and maths because supposedly they don't want artists, you know. Even at art school, they tried to turn me into a teacher. They tried to discourage you from painting, and you know, why not be a teacher? Because then you can paint on Sunday. I decided against it.
You know, your drawings look a little like James Thurber's.
Well,
not a
I
lot,
used to
but-
love his stuff when I was a kid.
Oh, did
there
you?
was
Stuff
two people.
looked like
yeah.
a bit like yours, you know, I think.
Well, he's older than me, so he came
Oh,
first,
I
so I look like him. I used to read
Nice
those stuff
point.
when I was a kid. Three people I was very keen on: Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, Thurber, and an English drawer, or whatever you call him, called Ronald Searle.
Ronald Searle. Oh, we
Yeah.
get him over here.
Yeah, so when I was about 11, I was turned on to those three. When I was, well, I think I was about 15 when I started Thurberizing the drawings. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yes. That was my imitation of Nigel Bruce, one of the real actors.
Betty Rollins' legs. I sat in a restaurant in Spain, and the
Yeah.
violinist insisted on playing Yesterday right in my ear. And then he asked me to sign the violin, and I didn't know what to say. I said, well, actually, okay, and I signed it, and Yoko signed it, and one day he's going to find out that Paul wrote it.
That's better than if they'd played Wedding Bells or Breaking Up, That Old Gang of Mine.
I guess so. I guess so.
Maybe I should have saved that for later. You know, well, let's talk about that for a second, because you know, Yoko, you've even been called the Dragon Lady, who
Yes.
the lady who brought the Beatles apart and took them all
Well, she
apart.
took
I
them
have trouble
apart.
with English.
Can we please give her the credit for all the nice music that George made and Ringo made and Paul made and I've made since they broke up? If she did it.
That's true. And now,
It turned out all right, didn't it?
yeah.
Anyway,
But
you
you're
know
aware
what-
of that. I mean, that the press always
yes,
saw
yes.
you as the wedge that was driven in.
The wedge.
And you can drive a wedge in 3 places or whatever, how many spaces there are between 4 people. But that was the. There are millions of girls who would love to have met, let alone married, one of the 4. Any one of the 4, probably, but certainly a lot of them.
Well, I resent to think of him as one of the 4, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, or any one of the 4, etc. Because I just met him as another artist and all that, and I didn't, particularly realize that part of it, really.
You were a Beatles fan before, or would you say you were a Lennon fan before?
Neither.
Neither. Didn't care
She
for
didn't
either
really
of them?
know about us.
No,
The
I
only
really
name
didn't
she knew
know.
was Ringo, because it means apple in Japanese. That's all. Ringo means apple.
Ringo means apple.
Yeah.
Did you know that
So-
when you named your company Apple?
No.
Oh. It was just one of those happy accidents.
Just one of those happy apples, yes.
Happy applesauce.
No.
Right numbered
Happy
syllables.
Christmas.
Ringo, if you spell it sideways, spells groin.
Yes. Star backwards is rats.
I know, and there are a lot of... Do you do those things too? I find that I'm
when I
always...
go along the road in the car, I'm always doing the signpost backwards. Anyway, she didn't split the Beatles because how could one girl split the Beatles or one woman? You know, the Beatles were drifting apart on their own. You know.
Can you remember when you realized that it was inevitable that you would split up?
No.
First,
No.
was
It's like
there anyone-
saying, you know,
Yeah.
did you remember falling in love? Not quite.
Yeah.
You know, it just sort of happens.
How long was it fun?
Yeah, well, everything's fun off and on, you know. So I suppose it could have gone on being fun off and on, or it could have gone worse, I don't know. It's just that when you grow up, you know, we don't want to be the crazy gang, which they might know over here, which is British, or the Marx Brothers, which is sort of being dragged on stage playing She Loves You when we've got, you know, asthma and tuberculosis, and when we're 50, you know. Here they are again, yesterday, all my troubles. So a long time ago I said that I didn't want to be singing She Loves You when I'm 30. I said that when I was about 25 or something, which in a roundabout way meant that I wouldn't be doing whatever I was doing then, you know, at 30. Well, I was 30 last October, and that's about when my life changed, really.
And especially for John, I can say that he's at least sort of outgrown, you know, whatever they were in, you know. Because I think it's very difficult for 4 artists who are so brilliant and talented to be together and do everything together, you know. I mean, just impossible almost. So whatever they were doing was almost miraculous, you know, that they were together at all.
With all the pressures and everything
Yes,
that they
yes,
had.
and,
I guess the Hard Day's Night, everybody thought that was what life really was like for you, and that a man with a handheld camera had managed to capture the essence of Beatle life, and that it was always just flitting about in a lovely, carefree, joyful way.
Well,
was it ever like that?
It wasn't that carefree ever. It was a lot more pressure. That was a sort of comic strip version of what actually was going on, you know. Pressure was far heavier than that. You know? And that was written after the author spending about 3 days with us when we played in London and then in Dublin and then back in London again. He wrote the whole of the film based on our characters, you know, clod-hopping Ringo, sharp John, whimsical Paul, and stern George. You know, all those, the Beatle character myths were formed from 3 days watching us, you know, which was a lot of junk, really.
Yoko,
Yes.
you work in film.
Yes.
Yeah, and John has referred to you
Well,
somewhere.
both do, actually, but, you know,
Both of you.
yes.
But John said somewhere that you were one of the best unknown artists in the world.
The most famous unknown artist in the world,
artist.
she is, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she's been in the so-called avant-garde world of New York for almost 15 years, producing...
How many?
15 years, about.
Well,
it's a long... 10.
Sounds like
Something like that. And she was quite an established artist before she met me. And then once she met me, then she became Mrs. Lennon. And well, that's when they started calling her a Japanese actress, you know, when in fact she never appeared in any movie up till then, and really, but mainly, and she'd been directing movies and having gallery shows and theatre shows and things like that, and then it got swamped with Mrs. Lennon, but now it's just about turning around. People are realising that she's an artist in her own right, but she's still the most famous unknown artist. Yeah. Do you want to comment on that?
That was brought out because of this film that we're going to see.
Yeah, we have a piece of a film that you did. It's not, maybe the most famous film you did was one called Bottoms.
I think so.
Bottoms, which was in fact a film of bottoms.
It was called Number 4, actually.
Yeah.
364 bottoms, 5 bottoms, that was it.
364 or 365?
365 bottoms, one for each day of the year.
Day of the year, yeah.
But it actually didn't contain 365 because I thought, well, nobody's going to really... It's a conceptual number, you know, and they couldn't possibly count it, so...
You mean that in some cases the bottoms were the same one
No,
posing as other
There might be
bottoms?
about 100 in it. You see, the interesting thing about the film is all the bottoms were the intellectual and artist people in London. And the soundtrack of the film is all of them trying to explain and be very uncomfortable about why they're taking the trousers off. Some guy saying, well, I normally do Shakespeare, you know. And then you see his bottom just, and it's not cut to each bottom, but the whole screen is just 2 bottoms to each side of the buttocks walking like that. Yeah. And all these comments are saying, well, you know, like I normally do Shakespeare, and what's it all about, and the real philosophy about taking your trousers off, and they're all jabbering on like that.
They were intellectuals, so they just had to sort of rationalize it somehow, you know, so they'd bring out Gurdjieff and Sartre and everybody out, you know, before they just take off their pants, and it was really funny. But the point was that I was asking to look for intellectual bottoms, you know. They had
intellectual bottoms,
yes, yeah. And so they would say, well, is this intelligent enough or whatever, you know. And when you look at it on the screen, it's just all the same, and that was the point, you know.
There's a show here called New Faces. What would you call... Well, never mind. Can we take a look at the piece of film you have?
Are you going to explain about it?
Tell us what we should
quickly
look
say
for.
that this is a female lead film in sort of a quiet sort of way. And it's like a diary, you know. It's about a woman who's naked and who's lying down. And the fly sort of crawling over her body. And later it gradually becomes 4 and 5 flies all crawling over her body. And the message is like, you know, there's lots of things in it and all sorts of level of understanding, I'm sure, but it has something to do with, you know, a life of a woman who is more like taking it rather than, you know, doing it positively. The flies crawling over you and just taking it, you know.
Passive woman.
It was shown at the Cannes Film Festival, and it got an ovation, believe it or not. And but the women always giggle like mad, especially as it's getting higher.
Had it just before it was getting very interesting, you know, I mean, sort of.
It was just getting interesting, but of course we're on TV.
Yes, this is television,
I mean,
after all.
This isn't Channel 13, is it?
I didn't even know you could...
More! Steady rolling. Aye, aye. I don't
when the censor found out the movie was called The Fly, you can't imagine what he thought.
Imagine.
Maybe you can. The Fly, you must have done an
enormous
number of retakes to get The Fly to do...
We had an enormous number of flies. In fact, the credits are almost as long as the film, because there's so many people catching flies from the back of dirty New York restaurants and things like that. And then we were catching them in the room. Yeah. The girl was very good, and her name was Virginia Lust.
Virginia Lust, L-U-S-T?
Yeah, L-U-S-T. Get out of that.
Did the movie lead to other roles for her or The Fly?
I should hope so. Well,
after 2 years of making movies, we made about, say, 12 together and apart. And we finally got deals here with people called Genesis in America and somebody else in Britain. And they'll be going around all the different colleges. So before our films haven't really been seen, so nobody really knows that we're filmmakers. Yeah. We've had them in Cannes Festival. They did all right in there. We had them in the Edinburgh Festival. There's a chance they're going in the New York Festival. They're definitely going in the San Francisco Festival. And they should be later this year starting to... About 5 of them probably will tour America. So you're
serious about film?
Oh, sure. Film is, well, it's like recording, only with your eyes, you know. You just make it visually, and it's just as interesting. And to combine the both is really interesting.
How would you feel about me if I were to ask if Bottoms was shown at the Cannes Festival?
Bottoms wasn't, no.
That was a bad joke.
That was a joke.
Oh, yeah. Well, That answers my question.
Yes, we'll be back after
Will,
this.
no, wait. Will you explain the people in the bags before the evening is out?
Yes.
Not now,
yeah.
but before the evening is over.
Are you going to tell a story of how you started the bag event?
Yes, well, that was when some composer was going to visit me from Europe, and I was sort of, I didn't really want to meet because I'm basically a very shy person. And then I thought, well, people don't believe me when I say I'm very shy, but we're both actually. And then I thought, no, I don't want to meet him, but then there wasn't anything I can do. So finally, he was coming, and it was about an hour before he was coming, and I couldn't do anything about it. So I just, out of desperation, made a bag, and I was in the bag when he came to visit me.
An all-over bag or just over your head?
All over.
All over.
Yes.
That's
and
a
so he was
terrific
saying, well,
idea.
where's Miss Ono and all that, and oh yes, well, it's you, is it, and all that. And he was pretty calm about it because he's heard of my work and all that. So he thought, oh, is this your, musical piece or something? And, I mean, it was very comfortable, because then I didn't have to be seen, I could see him, but I couldn't.
And there's no
That's a
prejudice.
great
If people are in bags, if a black man goes for a job in a bag, if everybody had to go in a bag for a job, there'd be no prejudice, you see. You'd have to judge people on the quality within, and we call it total communication. We were asked to make a film for Austrian TV, which we did, called Rape, which wasn't a rape, but it was called Rape. It was rape by camera, in fact. And when we went to Austria to show it, we did a press conference there in a bag, and it was great because all the press came in, and they never saw us. We were just both in a bag, and they interviewed the bag, and they're saying, "Oh, is it really you? And what are you wearing? And will you sing a song?" And that. And why us? And they said, "What is this?" I said, "It's total communication." They said, "But why did you pick on us? We've never seen a Beatle." And it was beautiful. And they were saying, "Do you realize the Habsburgs lived here?" And we're saying, "Yeah, so." And it was a great press conference, and they all had a very serious conversation with the bag. And next day, the headlines in Austria were, the show of bag, and all the important press men all just talking to it. So those are.
Which one am I supposed to look?
Now we're here. Is this confusing you a little bit?
It
This
is,
setup
all these cameras. Don't know which one I'm supposed to be looking at.
must be exciting
Yeah,
for you to
that's-
be next to a famous person.
It
on
is, it's
television.
very exciting. I don't do this every night,
No, I do, unfortunately. No, you're probably wondering what we were looking at. George saw the lights go on over the cameras, which give me the lead into the commercial. Actually, I don't think the audience at home cares what we're looking at. I mean, they're more interested in what we
Well,
think.
I want to know what's looking at me, really. I'd
Yeah.
like to check it out. There he is.
You don't have to. They always say you don't have to worry about what camera's on; that they'll find you.
Yes.
That's how I.
Big Brother is watching you.
Whatever. I haven't. You're only the second member of your former organization that I've ever met. I know John.
You didn't meet the other 8.
No. Were there that many?
Yeah,
No,
there's hundreds.
I only. I know
You
John.
ever hear of the 18th Beatle?
There were rumors that the Beatles were not always the same person. In fact,
No.
there was once a rumor that there wasn't even the real 4 of you who came over here on one trip, that they just sent 4
We just sent
guys.
4 dummies out there.
That and, what was the other one? Oh, that you actually were all bald and that had no hair, and that you would, that was so you could go out in the street and not
It's
be
all
recognized.
truth. Pure
Oh, it
truth,
is?
Yeah.
Yoko sat in that very chair.
Well, I bet many people have sat in this.
Oh, a lot of
chair.
people have sat in it, but I was just
I
thinking...
saw the show. It was very nice. Very
Did you see
nice.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one thing they forgot to plug, so I thought I'd plug it for them, and that's their new Christmas record. We wish you Merry Christmas. War is over. Get yours now. Thank you.
Is there such a record?
Yes, he made it after he was on the show, so he didn't get a chance to talk about it.
Is there a slight undercurrent of hostility between you and
No,
other members of
really,
your... No, you can
John,
tell me. I
you
mean,
know-
I wouldn't... I'm not going to tell anybody.
No, I just thought I'd take the opportunity and promote his record for him. War is over if you want it. Happy Christmas.
Yeah.
Apple Records.
Well, are you in any sense in contact with each other? I mean...
Yeah, I saw him last night, actually, at the premiere of Raga, which is what we should talk about, maybe.
Okay. But I mean, what did you say to
I
each
said,
other?
hi, hello.
Do you have writers who think of these things, or do you just have them ready and you can just
Yeah.
snap them right out
Yeah.
like that?
We have writers home,
And
rooms full of them,
What did he come back with right away?
with hi.
Yeah? Gee, this ought to be... was there more, or did that
Well,
just go on? That's pretty
You've
good.
got real boring people, to talk to on your show. I'm probably
Yeah.
the biggest bore you've ever had on the show.
Really? You think?
Yeah.
Well, I'll be the judge of that.
Oh.
Listen, I'll tell you.
Well, I don't really, they asked me, do you want to come on the Dick Cavett show? And I said, I got nothing to talk about, really.
Yeah.
They said, well, think of something, anything. So I thought, okay, we'll go and talk about Raga, which is...
Film. You mean that's it? When we're done talking about that, then...
Then I go.
You don't like to talk, then?
Well, not really. Sometimes, if there's something to say, but there's really nothing to say these days.
I have that feeling, too. People think that I must love to talk and that I would love to go to parties and yak my head off. And I could go for months without talking.
Well, you talk every night, don't you?
I know, and I've never liked it. I mean, I don't crave conversation. I could sit in an empty room for days and days. I'd have to leave occasionally, but not to talk. I mean, in other words, I don't have a terrific appetite for talking. The reason I'm rattling on like this is that you've just frightened me by telling me that you don't like to talk. And I figure I may have to, will I have to fill then this last hour
You
of the
just
show?
talk and I'll watch.
Okay, well, we will. Let's talk about the film. And then, before we get to that, though, since we may run out.
Let's get to something else.
When you, if you and John and Yoko do meet, though, you're not really
No.
gritting your teeth.
No, we're good friends.
Yeah. Well, all of that about her being the problem with the group, is that slightly silly that one woman could be so much of a problem?
No, the group had problems long before Yoko came along. Many problems, folks.
Can you remember who was the first to say, I bet we'll break up one day, that this won't go on, that this is sort of a dream, that we can't all stick together?
I don't really remember anything about the Beatle days. It seems like a sort of, previous incarnation when I think about it.
And a long time ago, like another life?
Yeah.
Do you regret any of it?
No. Don't regret really anything, I mean, that's what happened and it was good, it was good, but it was also good to carry on, do something else. In fact, it was a relief.
Sometimes they say
Some people can't understand that, because Beatles was such a big deal. They can't understand why we should actually enjoy splitting up. But there's a time, when people grow up and they leave home or whatever they do, and they go for a change, and it was really time for a change.
Don't you think a lot of people just envied the idea of being world celebrities, though? And being
Some people, would go on and on forever, singing the same tune and playing the same gig if they were making some money, Yeah. But I think we'd all rather give that up and try going on our own and try doing something we really want to do. And if we don't make it, then hard luck. But as it happens, we've all got such a lot of goodwill hanging over from being Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably wouldn't have me on the show if I hadn't have been one. Let's face it.
No, you wouldn't get here on looks alone. Do you,
we will return after this message
now, wait a
from our local
minute.
station.
Just because that comes on doesn't mean you have to do it right away.
Oh,
Do you feel like doing it now?
I just did it.
Oh, right.
Oh, I see. 4 or 5 minutes.
We will-
Leading. 4 and 5.
He's right, folks. We will return after this message from our local station. See, when you say it, then we know. Talking with George Harrison, who wants to know if it's over yet. Do you think you might have been the most anxious of the four to get out? I get that impression from reading about you.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder
It was
why.
well, because over the years, I had such a lot of songs mounting up that I really wanted to do, but I only got my quota of 1 or 2 tunes per album.
Mm-hmm.
And that way I would have had to have recorded about 100 Beatle albums just to get out the tunes I had in 1965.
Were you held down by the other fellas?
Well, very subtly, yes.
Yeah? How would they
not
do
really,
it? I mean,
they didn't strap me down or anything like that.
Yeah.
But no, it was just the way things happened, It started off I didn't write, they wrote, then I started to write, and it was sort of trying to push in a bit.
You don't actually read or write music, do you?
No.
Well, then when you say write,
Well,
and
right.
if you have a tune that hits you, how do you get it down?
Just keep it in your head, you know. Just work it out on the piano or on the guitar.
But then do you tape it, or what preserves
Sometimes put it on tape. But usually you can remember it in your head if you don't. I mean, I write the words down and remember the tune in my head.
Do you wish you'd studied composition and
No.
all of that? You don't need it.
Well, maybe it would help somewhere. I probably wouldn't have to pay a copyist.
Yeah. But you don't miss it. I mean, you can...
No.
It would just help. Maybe
Because
might
it's
save
not
time,
really
so-
sort of music, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, there's a difference between people who write music and classical things and big arrangements to the sort of thing I do. It's just really, it's very simple.
There was also the theory that you attracted more girls by being the quiet one, in the same sense that a guy at a party who sits in the corner will have the girl come over and say, "Oh, what's the matter?"
It's
You know,
just
and this was not a calculated
dirty rumor.
philosophy on your part. Was it?
Just a rumor, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Paul used to get them all with his, you know.
Do nerves hit you
Oh, yeah,
badly?
terrible. Sometimes I sit down, like before the show, and try and figure out what it is inside that starts all this tension.
Where's it coming from?
I don't know, no idea. Otherwise I could control it.
They used to say that's a way to get rid of tension, is if you can try to sit down and think exactly where it
Where
is.
it's
Is it in
coming
your
from.
stomach, or what gives you that wave
No,
through the
it
stomach?
comes from
or through the
everywhere
arms?
all at the same time. That's the problem. You can't it's sort of abstract, somehow, nerves. Well, the way nerves act upon you.
We have a piece of film here, and I'm anxious to see it, because I didn't get to go to that concert, but I heard all about it. They're really ahead of us, aren't they? It's supposed to be one of the best things ever done of this kind, and one of the most successful charity things of this kind that anybody ever put together. And did you get the idea just sitting alone one day, or how did it come to you?
It was Ravi Shankar's idea. He wanted to do something like this, and he was talking to me and telling me about his concern for the thing and asking me if I had any suggestions. Then, after half an hour, he talked me into being on the show. And so, once I decided I was going to go onto the show, then that was it, you know. I just had to try and get a band together and set up. I organised the things with a little help from my friends for Madison Square Garden. And that's it. It just snowballed, and the whole thing was thought of and planned and executed all within about 4 weeks.
Yeah. And it raised an enormous amount of money. And now, the thing that always bothered me was, how do you know that the victims of the problems in India and in Pakistan will get the money that you raise at a thing like that? Where does it go? Once it goes into the Madison Square Garden box office, then how does it get to the people that you see starving?
Well, there was, because this concert was done with such short time for preparation, also because so many of these concerts were rip-offs, we wanted to ensure that we could do the concert and nobody would think that we were keeping the money ourselves. So there was such a short time. There was only like 3 weeks by the time we'd more or less decided the concert was going on, and then we had the date set for Madison Square Garden, which was like the only available day that we had there. So we decided the best thing would be to give the money and say out front that this money is going to such and such a charity, and then we checked different things out. We're going to give it to the Red Cross. This was the first idea. We give the money to the American Red Cross, who in turn could give it to the Indian Red Cross, but then we heard so many different stories about the Red Cross and how there's, you know, hurricanes hit some place in America and they just take care of the whites and all the blacks are there and they're not taking care of them. So you hear so many different stories about things.
I hadn't heard that.
Well, we heard so many stories about all different organizations. In the end, we had to really say what we were going to give the money to. So we said, we'll give the money to UNICEF, and they have to say to us exactly what they need, and they can come to us and say, we need this and this and this, and then we'll sign the check and let them buy the things they need. So the concert made $250,000, which actually is really very small in terms of the amount of money we're going to make from the record.
The record and probably the film.
But the record, for the record, I'm hoping when we've realized some of the money, which should be around January, if the record comes out at all this year. That's another problem. We're having a slight problem with a record company. But if the record does come out early December, by mid-January we should have realized quite a lot of money, a few $1 million. At that time, Ravi was going to be in India, so I was going to go out there, get the money into India, and then I'll take it there myself, because I don't want the money to get lost. It's taken, 3 or 4 months' work to do it. I don't want the money to end up in somebody's pocket.
I guess you've had... I haven't seen this bit of film, but I know this is the concert that people saw pictures of in the magazines. Bob Dylan showed up as a surprise, at least to the audience. And will you do that kind of thing again, do you think? It seems like a very good idea.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe. I thought that, you see, it's difficult for... Not all musicians are rich enough through record sales or such like to be able to donate their services all the time. So I figured a good way to do it would be maybe 2 concerts in each town, like similar to Madison Square. The first show, we keep the money, and the second show, we give the money to the charity. That way we can feed the starving musicians, and the second, we can feed the people.
Yeah.
I think
they
sounds
criticize rock groups for being over-commercialized on the one hand, and yet the members of them are supposedly socially conscious on the other hand. So it seems like this is a wonderful way of combining those two things. If you can draw a lot of money, ridiculous sums by the average person's reckoning, then why not do it this way? There must be loophole. There must be other problems. Is the government suspicious of anything that is passed off?
I don't think so.
Because you say there have been rip-off concerts.
Yeah. I think if you take sort of precautions, which is really when we said we'd give the money to UNICEF for the concert, that was really a precaution, because too many things could have gone wrong. And it would have been terrible to have done the concert and for it to turn out really bad. So many concerts turn out bad, like I think the Stones did, and people getting killed, and it's really bad. So it's very important, I think, for something to come out really good, that feels good, and the people that actually does something.
The Red Cross should not feel particularly singled out. Right?
Right.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's just what I heard, I've heard things about everybody, about I've heard a lot about you.
Oh, no. Well, it's only a 90-minute show. We won't have time to go into that. What have you heard?
Whatever you try to do, somebody would say, don't give it to the Red Cross, give it to them. So you say, okay, we'll give it to them. And then somebody writes saying, don't give it to them, they're terrible. Yeah, every move you make, in the end, I just think, well, maybe we shouldn't do anything. Really, I mean, that's the easiest thing would just to be to sit at home and not try and do anything for anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because that's the situation. You can create some money, then you got the problem of who to give it to. If you can give it to somebody, then you have to worry about if they're going to get it. And like it's the same with the record, all these musicians came. Some of them flew thousands of miles, didn't get paid for anything. They came and did the show, all out of the kindness of their hearts. Then I spent a month with Phil Spector, produced the record, in a studio till like 7 in the morning, making this record, getting the package together, and we get that ready, and we give it to the record company, and they say, now, how much are we going to make? So, no, you don't make anything, we make it. It's for the refugees, and they say, well, they don't want to do it for cost. We want them to do it for what it costs to manufacture. Actually, we've paid the cost so far. Yeah. Our company's paid for all the boxes, millions of boxes and things, books that go with it. Then we give it to them on a plate, and they want more money. And it's really not on, It's really unfair. But
what about Apple? Well,
Apple, that's our company. We've paid... so far, all the costs to make the record, to make the box, make the package, all the expense involved in the show. And then Capitol, whose Apple has a contract with to distribute. They just have this distribution deal. So we're giving it to them, saying, aren't you lucky, you know, you're the company who's going to distribute this wonderful record. And they say, no, we want this money, that's not enough, we want that. And because they've lost so much bread, you know, they just really lost, and they kicked all the staff out, fired everybody, brought in a new guy who was working in England. He was really from India, good old Bhaskar Menon. And Bhaskar happens to be from India, and I thought really at first he was really into the whole idea of it. But, you know, it's just been held up. This record should have been out a month ago, really. But now, we still haven't solved the problem.
It will come out,
But
though.
we've got Dylan, you know. Dylan is CBS, and, you know, they're cool about it. And we've got Shelter and Elektra, and all different record companies have all, you know, said, OK, right, you know, put it out. And the problem is with our distributor.
You'll get it out, though.
We'll get it out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just put it out, you know, put it out with CBS and let, you know, Bhaskar have to sue me. Bhaskar Menon. I'll get you. We're going to play the Sue Me, Sue You
That's right,
blues.
Bhaskar. Sue him.
Sue me, Bhaskar.
Good. George, television in America isn't as mature as it is in England.
No,
You
it's
can't
very
say
good in
certain
England,
things.
yeah. I can't
but,
watch TV in America, to tell you the truth. It's such a load of
Really?
Yeah, it's terrible. Not the Dick Cavett show, of course.
I wondered.
No, it just drives you crazy, you know, the commercials. You just get into something and it's sorry now, another word from, and another word from. And in the end, you know, they just put commercials on all the time.
But you have commercials, too, over on your side
Yeah,
of the
but
pond.
it's really done good, you know. It's really done good. They show maybe, if it's a 30-minute show, they'll have the commercial at the beginning, then the show will start, and after 15 minutes or so, it'll end, and they say, end of part 1, ding, and then it goes into the commercial, and then the commercials end, and it says part 2. Here it just goes, jing, 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 from one into the next. You don't know if it's a commercial or if it's the show. I mean, it does some of the things.
Let's say there are a lot of commercials. I'll give you that. I have a serious question I want to ask you, and I have a feeling we're going to get interrupted before I get to you. But I meant to get into this with John and with you.
Have you ever seen Monty Python's Flying Circus?
Yes.
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 Well,
very good.
You want to get that on in America. It's really good.
I thought of trying to get some of that and showing it.
You try and get some
but there wasn't
clips.
time.
It's really good.
Yeah. Can I get to my serious question?
Yeah.
You have this tremendous influence, and you had, when you were together, you had this gigantic influence on the young people, right? And everybody knows that the Beatles went through a drug phase. Did it ever occur to you, or did you ever stop and think of it this way, that the fact that this was known and the fact that you were the Beatles might have caused thousands of kids to go into drug problems that might not have otherwise?
Well, no. Let him ask
Shut
the
up, will you?
question. Let him ask the question. First of all, when we took the notorious wonder drug LSD,
Yeah.
it was we didn't know we were having it. John and I had this drug, and it was given. We were having dinner with our dentist, and he put it in our coffee and never told us. And we never heard of it. I mean, it's a good job we hadn't heard of it, because there's been so much paranoia created around the drug that people now, if they take it, they're already on a bad trip before they start. Whereas for us, we didn't know anything. We were so naive, and so we had it, and we went out to a club, and it was incredible. It was really incredible. So a couple of years later, Paul had the drug too. And the TV people in England came and they said, so you've had this wonder drug LSD. And he was saying, oh, look, it's, you know, the question you asked me about the responsibility for everybody else. Paul said to the TV people, look, I'm not saying if I had the drug, it's you. If you're going to ask me if I've had it, I'm going to say yes because I've had it. I'm not going to lie. So he said, they said, well, have you had LSD? And before they asked, he said, it's your responsibility, because if you're going to ask me and I'm going to say yes, and you're going to put it on the TV saying, yes, we've had LSD. So really, it was their fault. So they asked the question, Paul said yes, and then they put it on and said, oh, they've had LSD, and then the world goes crazy.
Yeah. I just wondered if you have to stop and think about, you used the word responsibility, which is it's always sounds so hokey when your school teacher says you have a tremendous responsibility. You know? But did you ever take that kind of thing seriously and think, we got to watch ourselves because if we do this, other people will do that?
Yeah, we always had to watch ourselves.
Yeah.
Because if we weren't watching ourselves, there was somebody else out there who was.
Yeah.
And there was always reporters who would follow us around on tour and always try breaking into our room, catching us doing something.
Yeah.
Something maybe that we shouldn't have been doing. And the whole thing is that people want other people to do nasty things because they feed off it. And then they write, they're doing nasty things. It's like in a newspaper in England. I met David Frost the other day. Can I say David Frost, or do you bleep it out?
Once.
Okay. I bumped into him in the hotel and he said, here, to really bring you down, is a copy of the News of the World. He'd just come from England. He brought this paper, and there's a big story on the front saying...
That's the scandal sheet in England.
Yeah. But it's a big story saying about this group called the Marmalade, how they had orgies with the teenage fans and all this sort of thing. But the whole idea of these reporters going out for months and months, scraping around, lifting up the pavement, trying to see what rubbish there is to write about. And then they write about it as if they're saints. And so I don't know where the responsibility... I mean, maybe you just should stay at home and never say anything. That's definitely the easiest.
Or why do people do things just because famous people do them is another question I've never been able to figure out exactly. Let me ask you one other thing, George, because do you have any thoughts on why hard drugs and rock stars have become synonymous? I mean, you can see why if you had a life like Bessie Smith had, or Billie Holiday or something like that, what they went through. If I were them, I suppose I would take anything that was available. But I mean, most of the people in rock haven't had that dismal, grinding, horrible kind of life. That is it in any way a way of emulating those other people who were like those
there's a lot of
people,
a lot of pop people who go through a hell of a lot. Just say in 1 year they see so much, and they go through so many different things that they either just want to get high. I mean, basically it starts with people who just want to get high, like people drink. I mean, that's a big problem. People have a drink, like I suppose after the show maybe you have a drink just to get a little high. So musicians, either drink a little bit or maybe they smoke a bit, and then they want to get a bit high, and they're sort of really looking for something. And it's the same with all those Bessie Smiths and all those people, because the world is such a hard place to try and make it in. So, I mean, they're all just like buffers, all those drugs and things, and I suppose if they get on top of you, they get next to you, and then you can't stop it. I don't know, the hard things.
That's what I wonder, like heroin. I mean, why that? Certainly, hardly anybody's been through anything like those people I mentioned, like Billie Holiday's life. So, a life like that, I can see the really violent hard drugs, I suppose, because anything might be better than what they're going through. But unless you're to the point where you can say, I am just in the fires of hell all day, day and night. Why the ones who've killed themselves, your colleagues, why heroin?
Well, that seems to be the big one.
Yeah.
I'm really unqualified to talk about heroin because I've never taken it. And I really don't intend to. There's... I'm sure it's just, it's probably just the best high, that's what it's down to. It's the one that gets them the highest, the quickest. But it just happens to kill you faster as well. I mean, they all sort of kill you in one way or another. And there's very few people who seem to be able to experience something like heroin and then get away from it. Because it just gets in the system and they become dependent on it. I don't know. It's sad, it's really sad because they're all looking for some deep love or something like that, and they miss it, It's much better to try and not take any drugs, If you can get straight, really straight, then in a way it's much higher. I mean, I'm not really qualified to talk about that either. I mean, I'm sort of in the middle,
Indian music and drugs don't mix, as I understand it.
No, there's been a big...
Ravi Shankar said so.
Yeah. There was a problem. You know, the Indian music really got popular during that 66, 67, you know, all the psychedelic period. And I think from that, most people have started to associate it with drugs because the hippies, apart from the classical people who used to go and watch the music anyway, like the hippie people at that time were the ones who caught on to Indian music, and it just happens that most of them were, you know, smoking pot or something. And since then, you know, I don't know, maybe Ravi will be able to explain how the two got caught up together, but it's really a problem. It's a problem for Ravi because he's, you know, trying to do this, spent years and years of real disciplined life in order to play this music, and then people think, oh, you know, he must have taken dope to play that good.
To Western ears, the unusual sound
Yes.
might suggest some sort of chemical intoxication.
No, I don't think it doesn't suggest anything. It has been somehow established from the very beginning, and I'm not blaming George, but you know, somehow because of him, the sitar became really popular among the young people and among many rock groups, and it was because of the association of those rock groups. You see, the kids took it for granted from the very beginning that, you know, it's something like rock music.
Yeah.
See,
Yes.
and then there happened to be people like Timothy Leary and Allen Ginsberg, you know, who somehow also established that Indian music is associated with drugs and things like that. So it all connected, and that's how it came. That's why you see in some of these films, when they show any scene with an orgy or some, you know,
Pot party. or something.
party, you hear this bizarre sound of sitar, which
Yes.
is bizarre because,
To the Western ear.
yeah, but that's really bizarre because the sound you hear is not the real sound of sitar. It's somehow, you know, played badly, some low string sitar played
Probably
electronic.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think you'd have to be you'd have to have an unusually clear mind to be able to do the
Absolutely.
17 parts of the instrument that have to be you have to be thinking about all at once.
That's true. You see, that's why I request my listeners to be in a clear mind, because I like to put them, you know, make them high. with
Yourself?
music. Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel rather cheated when they're already high.
What what goes on at these raga classes of yours?
Well, you see, actually our music is taught from person to person, like from the guru teaches his disciple. It's a very personal thing. It's like
Is it shisha, or what is the word for the student?
shishya.
Shisha. Okay.
That's the Sanskrit.
There's the guru and the shisha.
Right. My God, you know that.
Wow. 2 words is really going fast.
So you see, that's the personal. But we are trying to also establish these classes and taught as much as possible in the modern manner.
But it was an actual guru only had one shishya probably at one time. Can you work with several at once because of the
Well-
shortage of gurus?
Well, it can happen, but it's best when it is more personal, you know.
Is raga around now where anybody can see it?
Yes, it's just being it has been released today. World
I think as
premiere.
we sit here, in fact, today.
Yes.
It came. Yeah, yeah. Are you performing in the U.S. now, as well as
Well,
teaching?
I have a few sitar concertos with the symphony orchestra. The next one is in Detroit, which will be on the 3rd, and one in Kalamazoo
Kalamazoo.
on the 7th.
And on Friday, Carnegie Hall.
And Friday, I'm performing this Friday in Carnegie Hall. That is sitar recital.
How do we get George to perform again someday?
How do you mean?
You will.
Perform what?
Well, I mean, no, he's not going to. There's no time to think.
Perform
You'll be
what?
appearing in public. Perform the act of music.
Oh, well, that's easy, you know.
Yeah. When you get everything arranged, would you ever consider?
If I ever get a minute free, I may just do that. I'm
Well,
too busy working.
Yeah. Really, what's keeping you too busy?
All this editing films and, you know, just since June, I've had really very little time. So we did that concert, then we did the mixing of the record, then we did the film, editing the film, and that's still going on now. Like this morning I was down there, just stuck in a room looking at bits of footage.
Everybody ends up editing film. Whatever else they started out as, they all end up editing film.
Well, tell us about what in fact you have got on, Paul.
We've been doing a lot of stuff. You know, we've had a lot of stuff happening down at Apple, you know, and we've been making records ourselves. We've been working like till 4 in the morning making records and stuff, you know. And the Northern Songs bid has been on, you know, so it's been high finance down there for the last couple of months. But it seems to be going okay now. When we started off as Beatles, you know, we knew nothing about the business side of it. And one thing that does happen in the business is that if you're the artist or if you're the singer or something, you do get agents and people, you know, who are on the business end of it. And sometimes you can get a bit carved up, you know. So that we've been involved in a lot of contracts and a lot of things, you know. It's all very boring, but we've had a lot of contracts and stuff that we have to try and straighten out, you know, now, so that we've become a bit more business-minded, you know, but I still can't stand business, you know, I'd much rather, you know, but we've got to actually sort of think now when we sign a contract, what does it mean, you know. It's growing up, you know, you've got to do it one time in your life.
Well, talking about growing up, one night I remember very well was the night you made this tremendous homecoming to Liverpool and the reception at the town hall. Do you long for those days when every time you appeared anywhere you were mobbed and...
Oh, no, I don't think so, you know. Those things, they're fantastic at the time. It's great at the time, all that, you know. But I tell you, we were around about that time, we were in New York and we played to 56,000 people at the Shea Stadium. And just after that, you know, you just sort of think to yourself, you know, now, what more can you do? You know, the only thing you can do more is like play to 57,000 or 58,000 next time. So you start to realise, you know, that you've either got to keep trying to play to more and more people and trying to be involved in like bigger and bigger events, or else just sort of cool it down a bit, you know. So that's what we're doing now, you know, cooling it down and living a bit more normal lives than we would have done. Trying to sort out the business bit. But I mean, I tell you, I sometimes think, well, we're not working very hard, you know, like you say, because we don't make that many appearances. But in fact, I was just thinking about it the other day, and we work harder than we've ever done now. You know, like we're slogging away. I was saying, you know, recording till about 4 in the morning. Then you get up the next day and you've got a meeting, a couple of business meetings and stuff. Then recording later in the evening. And in between all of that, you've got to write all the songs for it, you know. So we work quite hard.
I've often heard it said by Beatle fans in Liverpool that they've always been sad that the Beatles have never come back to the city since they really became big time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's one of the things, you know. I mean, we always, you know, we've come back when we've been doing tours and stuff, you know. We've always played the Empire and always come back and done that. But it's not just a question of not coming back to Liverpool. We haven't come back to anywhere, you know. It's like, so the people in Runcorn say, haven't been back to Runcorn. The people in New York say, haven't been back to there. People in Japan say, haven't been back, you know. But the idea is generally that we don't want to do as many performances. Because, see, I was saying, you get to this point where you say, what else can you do, you know? What can you do that was bigger than the last one? So that instead of trying to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, we decided to concentrate mainly on records. So after that, we did Sgt. Pepper, you know, and then we did Magical Mystery Tour, which was a new thing we tried then.
From your point of view, were they a success? Certainly the Magical Mystery Tour came in for some criticism, didn't it?
Oh, it did, yeah. The thing is, see, at the time, I'll tell you what was, there's a couple of main things that were really hashed up about that. One was that we made it in colour, you know, it was a sort of colour thing. And it was put out, first of all, in black and white. So there's whole big sequences that you couldn't understand, you know, because I saw it on the telly, and it just looked mad, you know, in black and white, because there were sequences where the colours changed, you know, and, you know, so, I mean, that was a bit daft. The thing itself was, we just did it off our own bat, you know, and I think it was put on like the wrong time on telly, when everyone's expecting sort of Christmas extravaganzas, and we put on this mad film. But I've since seen it, you know, and a lot of people have since seen it, and for instance, been around America since. And it's it's being very successful at the moment, you know, because it's now people are sort of catching up with what it's about now, you know. And so it's now beginning to be very, very successful. It wasn't on the day it was out. You know, the first day it was out in Britain, there was a lot of comment about it. But it, you know, as I say, you know, it's been shown in America and it's been shown in a lot of places since. And now it's getting very successful. I tell you, I think it's going to be in about 10 years' time. It's going to be one of those films that said, yeah, let's have a look at that again. And it'll be like an old, you know, sort of like Rock Around the Clock in them. You know, now they look better than they did then. You know what I mean? Because they get some nostalgia and stuff. At the time, it was just a bit sudden and it was a bit sort of too quick. But I still like it as a thing. I still think it's great.
You've had a very varied career, Paul. What sticks out? Is there anything that sticks out most in your mind? Anything that's happened or anything you've done that really gives you a great deal of satisfaction?
Well, I think mainly the things that give me the satisfaction are things like, you know, the receptions you get. Like you said, the Liverpool reception, you know. That was fantastic at the time, you know, it was incredible. Those are the highlights for me. There was another one just like that in Adelaide, in Australia, and you know, we had the same kind of reception. It was like being the Queen or something. You know, we came in from the airport. It was the same in the Liverpool one, and we came in from the airport, you know, and we're just all the crowds lining the route, you know, and we're giving them the thumbs up. And we went to the town hall, you know, and we're up with the Lord Mayor of Adelaide there, and we're giving the thumbs up. But in Liverpool it's okay because everyone understands the thumbs up. But in Australia, it's a dirty sign. So they all wonder what we're doing there. You know?
Paul, let me, if I may, turn for a minute to your personal lives. The Beatles have come in for a lot of criticism about things that have happened in their personal lives. Do you think it's all been justified? How have you felt about it when you've had these criticisms?
The criticism is okay, you know, because, I mean, people, you're allowed to criticise. See, the thing is, our whole thing, on the surface of it, I mean, because you know, you read about us in the newspapers, hear about us on interviews and stuff. All of that, on the surface of it, you know, I understand why it comes in for criticism, you know, because I'll tell you one thing about us, we've never been dishonest. So that, for instance, if John, you know, because I know you're talking about John and Yoko mainly, you know, most people. So if John, you know, sort of marries Yoko and divorces Sin, a lot of people think, well, he's just mad, you know, because he's gone off with this mad Japanese girl. And instead of Cynthia, you know, he's a great girl. But the truth about it all is that he loves Yoko, you know, and so that, like, whether you like it or not, I tell you, he said one thing to me which made me understand what they were up to, you know, just as two people, not as anything else, just as two people. He just said, I tell you, it's like holding hands on the back row of the pictures. And I suddenly realised they're not freaks. You know, they may look like freaks, and they may, because he says that, you know, John, he says, well, it's too bad, you know, if I look, you know, if we look like this, or people think we're funny, or people think, it's too bad, you know, this is how we are, and we're very straight, because they are really, they're two great people, you know, and they're very much in love, you know, so you can't say anything more than that.
What about the other side of it, the attitude of the Beatles towards drugs?
Well, again, you see, that's another thing. It's like someone comes up and asks you, and they say, now, what do you think about drugs, you know? Okay, so if you've been involved in it and if you've tried drugs and stuff, then what can you say? You can only lie if you want your public image to be great. The only way out is to lie, you know, and like so many people do, you know that sort of the Hollywood star thing. It's wonderful in your country, it's so wonderful, everything's rosy, it's beautiful. Yes, do you take drugs, Mr. Hollywood? He said, no, it's terrible, and I think it's... But the thing is, we're honest, you know, so that, you know, if people are awkward enough to go and ask us that question, they're going to get an honest reply, and it's always going to be something that they may not like, you know. They may like it, they may not. But I'll tell you one thing is that it's honest. At least it's an honest reply, and at least we didn't mess around saying, oh, no, we've never touched them, and oh, it's terrible and all that, you know. At least we were honest about it, you know. And I think, you know, you can't really go far wrong. You can get people... we get a lot of the older generation really moaning at us, you know, and saying it's terrible. I met a fella coming up on the train, and he said, he asked for my autograph for his daughter, you know. And he said, it's good to see you looking so healthy. He said, from what we hear about the Beatles, you know, we expect them to be a real depraved lot, you know, and so we expect you to be washed out and really looking terrible and everything. And, we're having a laugh about it, and I was saying, yeah, I understand, because from what you hear about us, you'd think we've gone potty, But I tell you, just as 4 people, we're really, we're all right, There's nothing seriously wrong.
You remain friends, or on the surface anyway, for a great length of time. Is there really this bond of friendship between you, would you say?
Yeah, sure there is. They're good lads, I tell you.
Is there anything which the Beatles as a whole, or you personally, would like to do? You've done a lot already. Is there anything you feel that is left that you can really achieve, that you really want to achieve?
Well, the main things in that are just in music, We've still got a lot to do in music, as far as we're concerned.
Anything particular?
Just to do better music, It's always been that. It's like we started off with Love Me Do, and the second record we wanted to be better, so we did Please Please, and we wanted the next one to be better. And it's that's where the ambition is, to make music that satisfies us and other people,
Why do you feel the Beatles have been so successful in their songwriting?
Well, see, the trouble with asking a question like that is you get an answer which could sound big-headed, because I think it's because we write good songs,
How do you imagine yourself, say, in 20 years' time, Paul?
Old.
Right.
So
you just go ahead. I'll just answer your question.
You've done these before.
I have done several of these interviews.
I've had the experience now of talking with, interviewing John, probably 9 or 10 times, maybe 15 or 20 hours of tape. And I would like to get your recollections of the earliest experiences and see in my own head how they perhaps compared with some of his. Just for the benefit of the audience, there were a couple of things about you that were different from them. You were the last person to join the group. You were the oldest. You came from the roughest part of town. As a child, you were unhealthy. Not
to say the least.
I mean, physically.
Yes.
Let's pick up
I'm
on
not too sure about mentally.
Let's begin with a couple of those points.
Okay.
For the others, growing up in Liverpool...
Do you want my prenatal experience?
No, we won't go back that far. But I want to go back to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. The roughest part of town. Your earliest recollections of Liverpool.
Well, it's my first recollection is 5, when we moved house. We moved just over the road. People in Liverpool don't move very far, But we had a 6-roomed house, and we moved to a 4-roomed house. And that was the first real recollection I can remember. I mean, I was born the day war broke out. But I don't remember all the bombs, though they did actually break up Liverpool, I mean, I remember when I was a little older, there's big gaps in all the streets, where houses used to be. And we used to play on them. And the air raid shells. But I don't actually remember any of the bzzz, boom, So 5 is the first one. I sat on the back of this furniture van and just went, I don't know, 300 yards up the road to the next street.
Do you remember the name of the street?
Yes, Madron Street was the one we lived in, and then we moved to a street called Admiral Grove.
Who'd you live with then?
My mother. My father sort of decided to leave when I was 3, so it was just my mother and I, and that was 6 rooms. It was very big, and the rent was expensive. So we moved into a great house, which was condemned 10 years before we moved in.
Really?
And it's still there now with people in it,
You were, by all general standards, even Liverpool standards, poor.
Yes. Working class poor. I mean, my mother had to go to work because she fed me.
What'd she do?
She did everything. She scrubbed steps, she was a barmaid, she worked in a fruit shop. She did everything. She had to earn a living,
And what about school? What were the earliest recollections of school? Did you enjoy it? Were you any good at it?
No, I don't remember ever enjoying school. The only great con I had, which I'm not sure if I remember this or my mother's told me it so many times, those childhood stories that they keep telling you, oh, remember the day, was the first day at school. Supposedly I came home at lunchtime, because it was only up the road, it was 3-4 minutes walk. I came home at lunchtime and said, we've got a holiday.
Just announced it.
And she believed me, and then she saw all the kids going past the window, She said, get out of here, get back to school. But I nearly conned her. That was the first time, at 5. But I never liked it. I always sagged.
How long were you in school?
About 5 years in all.
That's the total amount of your education.
Yes.
I read somewhere that much later on in the chronology of this, somebody went back to your school to look for records as to whether or not you were there.
That was me.
You went back to, and they didn't.
No, I was. You see, if we'll get up to that.
Yeah.
At 6.5, I was very ill with peritonitis. So I went from 5 to 6 and a bit. So I did a year and a bit, right? Then I was ill. They thought it was appendicitis. They rushed me to the hospital. It was too late. It was appendix. It exploded. And that's a heavy operation. And it was heavier then, you know. Operations are getting easier as the years roll by. So, excuse me. I was in hospital for a year then. And then it's convalescent and all that. So I didn't go back for 2 years, you know. And after that, I think that's when I really started to hate it. I know I didn't like it before I went to hospital, but then, because you never caught up with the class, you know, there was no teacher going to take special care of me. You were in the class, and this is it, folks, we're off. And you had to try and get yourself up there, you know, and I always found it very hard, so it was easier to stay off. So I wouldn't, you know, my mother would pack me off to school, and I'd just go and walk around the park with a couple of guys or whatever, and write little notes. And we always got caught because we couldn't spell. You know? Right.
Was the curriculum in your school when you were 5 or 6, in the 5th or 6th grade, similar to what somebody in America at age 5, 6, or 7 may be doing?
Well, 5, 6 is mainly playtime and painting and learning to read, you know, cat and stuff like that, and showing your letters. They don't expect too much of you at 5. Nowadays, I mean, just with my kids, I mean, mine could read before they went to school, and then they went to kindergarten school. You know, and we took an interest. I mean, I'm not putting my mother down. She had to go to work, but it would have been better. I mean, I had a girl who used to look after me who taught me to read, which was a friend of my mother's daughter. She was a couple of years older than me. And she used to mind me when your mum went to the pub, you know, or with pictures or whatever they went, if they went out at night. And she taught me to read. I didn't learn to read till I was 9.
And write?
No, I didn't learn to write. I mean, it all came together, really. You know, I'm still not a great writer.
When you think back to the fact that you missed what would be considered the simplest and most basic of education, some people regret that they never went on to college, and some people regret that they never finished high school.
I do now.
You do?
Because your knowledge is so limited, you know. I mean, just your basic school knowledge, you know. 1066, and I never took the Latin. John took the Latin and the painting.
Could you conceive of a time ever when you would return to school?
No.
To study anything?
No, not now. No, I mean, I'm intelligent but uneducated. You know?
Just out of curiosity, what was the last book that you read that impressed you, that meant anything to you?
Dahlgren. It's a science fiction book. So I went to hospital, I came out,
I
got into school, that was okay. Then at 13 I got pleurisy. And then that turned into TB. So they put me away for another year. So I never went back to school after 13. That was the thing we were talking about before.
Right.
You have to go and get your form to say you finished school so you can pick up money from the government, you know, till they get you a job. You know, at school you have to go to this building, the big official says, where's your dismissal from school? And so I went to the school and I said, excuse me, can I have this piece of paper? I don't even know what to call now. You know, to say I'm actually 15 and I was at this school. And they said, they went through you never came to this school. I say, honestly, I came to this school. No, you're not in the record. So they found me in the end because, you know, they were looking just the last year. They didn't go back 2 years, you know, to 13. So they found it in the end, which was, the point is they had no recollection of me ever being at that school. Mm-hmm. Then suddenly when we made it in the Beatles, they had my desk in the garden, you know, for the school garden parties. And they were charging the money to sit on it, you know, so that was always a great joke. Yeah.
The time that you were in the hospital, all the times you were in the hospital, there was one period of time where you were, I'm told you were virtually unconscious for close to a year.
No, 6 months. Well, that was the stomach one. That was very dangerous. It's like, I was sick, man. They told me mother 3 times I'd be dead in the morning. And that was heavy for her, so I realized why she's so possessive. But I was ill, yeah.
Pleurisy, TB, appendix.
Yeah, peritonitis.
The 6 months
Never broken a bone, though.
The 6-month period when you were unconscious.
Well, the longest one stretch, I mean, you weren't out for 6 months. 6 months, and I could have come home in a couple of weeks. You know, I was really getting better. And I had a birthday in hospital, and I had this little toy bus. And I was in a cot, you know, with the sides on. And the kid in the... Oh, well, I'll tell this one first. The kid in the next bed wanted to see the bus, you know. So, oh, yeah, here. And so I leaned right off, and it's about 4 foot off the ground. But I leaned too far and came right out and ripped all this, you know, the surgery open. That was the dangerous time. So they put me in for another 6 months. Which one was I going to say? Oh, and at that time, because I was in a cot, I could pick anything up with my feet. Pennies, bits of paper, anything that fell off the cot. You'd get your foot on it. Oh, got it. I got very good feet for picking things up, folks.
Did you ever feel like you were going to die? Were you ever conscious?
No. And now I refuse. I believe I'll be here till I'm 87, whatever happens. I think planes don't bother me, trains, nothing like that bothers me. I'm just going to be here till I'm 87.
It was tough. I mean, when John or Paul or George reminisce, they talk about a time when things were difficult for them, gangs and teddy boys.
Yes, it was difficult for them because they were never in them. I was always in them.
You were a gang member.
Yeah. You had to be where I lived.
When did you join the first gang? What was the name of the gang?
They weren't names. They were leaders of the gang. There was like Clem Martindale. There was guy Tony ran this gang. I mean, they were all just names, you know. We were like the Dingle gang, you know. That's because of the area.
The Dingle gang?
Yeah, because I came from Dingle, you see, that was the area. But there were several gangs in that area. But the name of the guy is who they used to call walk with, you know. You'd walk en masse to try and cause trouble. And then it'd be into area fights.
In America, when that was going on, when there were gangs where I grew up in New York City, they really hurt people. They killed people, they robbed stores, they burned buildings.
Yeah, that actually went down. And knifing people, and, you know.
Did you ever
I got beaten up a few times. You know. Mainly by the people you were with, you know, because it's that terrible craziness in that gang situation where if you're not fighting an outsider, you get crazy and you start fighting amongst yourselves, like mad dogs in a way, you know. And you have the outfits. And there's a lot of company. Well, a big long jacket, teddy boy suits we call them. I think you call them zoot suits.
Zoot suits.
You know, tight, very tight trousers, big crepe sole shoes, heavy belt, which I put washers on them, you know, heavy washers, and you'd have them ground down, and the buckle would be ground down, so it would hurt. And people would have razor blades behind the lapels in case you got grabbed. Then the person would chop their fingers off, you know, and in the cap. And there was a lot of heavy.
So it's important for us to know that this wasn't like a little dress-up costume party.
This was deadly serious because that's what life was about, you know. That you were in the gang, and it was like you were safe in our area. You had to be in one. It was like, you know, if you weren't, you laid your life on hands because you weren't protected or beaten up by, you know, you'd be beaten up by everybody. You know, they had a terrible thing in Liverpool where you'd walk past someone and say, you looking at me? And if you said no, they'd say, why not? So you couldn't win. If you said yeah, then they'd get you anyway. I mean, there was no answer to that question, you looking at me.
I know you were in it for self-preservation, but was there ever a time when you said to yourself, I just got to get out of here?
I said that as soon as I started playing. And there's a friend of mine, Roy, who's probably still my only friend left in Liverpool.
What's his name?
Roy Trafford. Telephone. And we started playing like skiffle band, you know. We used to play in the cellar. I used to work in a factory. We'll get to that. We used to play for the men in the lunchtime down the cellar. And when I started playing, I started gradually moving out of walking with the lads, as it was called. You know, that's all you'd do. You'd walk up and down roads, you know, stand on corners, beat someone up, get beaten up, have a fight, go to pictures, break it up. I mean, you know, it gets boring after a while. You've been that road, you know. So we decided, you know, we were gradually cutting out, and we'd play, so we'd have an excuse not, you know, when we started getting little gigs, you know, mainly auditions for the first year. That's all you ever get. It's a free show. And I remember one night we went to pictures, and we came out, and there was this whole gang getting it together, And it was the people we knew, you know. And they said, we're going down to this other area, Garston, to, sort it out. So you had a decision then. You could say, I'm not going, and they would beat you up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Or you went and took your chance, you know. So we went. But then we phased it out and phased it out. And that's how I got out of it.
About how old were you?
When I finally got out, 19, 20. 15, you're a kid, but you know the lads. You really start getting into it 16. It's about 4 years, 3 or 4 years.
You said it was a skiffle band.
Yeah, there
What's a skiffle band?
Well, in England, in sort of 58, this big craze came out called skiffle, which was based on like American bottle parties, like blues bottle parties, you know, where you take a washboard into the house and a bottle of beer. It'd be open house, and I believe that people just like pay a quarter or a dime would pay the rent parties. And so you'd have someone with a jug and a washboard and a tea-chest bass, you know, or an oil drum with a stick and a string, and someone would have a guitar. Yeah. It'd be like made-up instruments, you know. So that's how I started in one of those. I mean, I had the drums, and
that was the first thing you went to.
The very first, yeah.
Why?
Because you didn't have to be able to play. Because no one could play in those days. We had this Lonnie Donegan and the Vipers and people like that were scuffle groups in England. And it was this sort of house music, you know. And so I got a kit of drums on Boxing Day. I was in a group in February. I mean, no chance in hell could I play by then. But neither could anyone else, bar the guitarist who always knew a couple of chords. Everyone else was making it up. You know?
The first time you sat down behind a set of drums, started doing it, what were there skiffle songs? Were there?
Yeah, there was Hey Lily, you know.
Hey Lily, Lily,
Lily Low.
Right.
Rock Island Line was a mighty good road. You know, all those type of things.
Early American country and western, or early American bluegrass.
Yeah,
early American
sort
folk.
of country folk blues. You know, if you can dig that.
That's the kind of stuff that you were hearing over the radio, I would assume, also.
Yes, because suddenly there was a great rave for it in England. You know, of this skiffle music. That's what started it in England. Every town, and in Liverpool. Then it progressed. I remember being thrown off. There used to be traditional jazz, and then the group would do the break, the intermission, you know.
The skiffle group.
The skiffle group, because it was cheap, you know, you'd have 3 or 4 guys, and half the time you didn't pay them, and if you did, we'd get about $1.50 each a night. That's what we were earning. So you had to get a lot of gigs, you know, to make up $20. So we were all semi-professional then, you know. I was an engineer in the day, and I'd play at night.
I've got to ask you one of those terrible interviewer-type questions, but that have to be inserted here. The moment you sat down the first time to play the drums...
Yeah. Well, go on, sorry. Go on. Say it, start again.
The moment you sat down to play the drums for the first time, was there any thought in your mind that not only would you become good, but that you would also become great, international, and indeed unforgettable?
Well, I think I thought I'd be everything but unforgettable.
It
goes back a long time, the drums, for me. It was like when I was walking to school, before I went to hospital the second time, there used to be a music store. I used to look in this store, just at the drums, you know, they had guitars and banjos and mandolins even in those days, and accordions and things like that. And I always looked, and there was one, just a tom-tom, which used to freak me out. I used to love this tom. I used to go and look at this tom-tom, you know, every day walking to school and walking back, I'd look at this tom. It was £26 in those days, which was a fortune. The whole kit I bought later on didn't cost that, you know. So I just wanted to be a drummer anyway, from very early on. There was never any other instrument. I mean, I'm not answering your question, but I'll get to it. And then in hospital, when I was with the TB, I mean, they just put you in a glass house, you know, because Liverpool was very... not the cleanest town in the world, you know, and a lot of TB went on in Liverpool. It was one of those cities that attracted TB. And so I was in hospital, and I used to play on the cupboard next to me with these cotton bobbins, big long bobbins, and I'd always be tapping. It just seemed to be my thing. Then I made a kit out of biscuit tins, you know. And then I bought a bass drum. The first drum I ever had was just this, because $4, this monster old bass drum with one skin. So when we'd have a party at our house, you know, and we'd have the man from over there play banjo, someone else would play harmonica or something, there'd always be a sing-song. There were always sing-song parties, you know, more than records. In those days, yeah, everyone sang a song, you know, and there'd all be, you know, oh, I do like to be beside the seaside, you know, it'd be all those songs. So I'd get me drum out, and of course they'd say, oh, it's the kid, you know, they'd let your ABBA go, you know, here comes the kid with his drum kit, look out. So I was 15, and so I'd bang this thing with 2 pieces of firewood for a while, then they'd get rid of me. Okay, get him off, and they'd send me out, you know, get rid of the drum. So I got rid of that. And then a friend of my father's, or my stepfather, Harry, in Romford, he was selling this kit for £10, man. I don't know what that's...
$25.
$25, and it was $30 in those days, real expensive. And so he went down to visit his folks for Christmas, and then he came back with this kit, which was amazing. There's drums. There was, you know, not a drum. There was drums. There was a snare and a bass drum and a hi-hat and one little tom-tom and a top cymbal, right? And a bass drum pedal. You don't have to kick it anymore. You know, so I mean...
That's what you do if you don't have a pedal. You have to,
yeah, you have to kick the drum. So I set it up in my bedroom, you know, the back bedroom, set it all up. Yeah. So off I go. Back. Boom! You know, load of crap. So you'd hear from the bottom of the stairs, keep the noise down, the neighbours are complaining. So I only ever did it twice, and I got shouted at both times, because, you know, it was a lot of noise, especially when you can't play. It's not, you know, drums aren't that musical at the best of times for playing melodies, you know, but it wasn't like a great solo, you know, with something interesting. It was just this mad thing hitting drums. So I never practiced. You know, I stopped it then, and I got into a band. It was the only way I could practice was to join a group. So I practiced with every group in Liverpool, and that's how and I've done that ever since. I've never sat in a room and played the drums. Like there's this kit here, I've just bought this. It's an old kit, and I just had it done up, but I'll never hit it while it's sitting here. I'll do it in the studio now.
Could you name some of those early groups? We researched that stuff.
Besides the Dogtown Skiffle group, the Eddie Clayton Skiffle group, then I would play with most bands around. I was well known in Liverpool, you know, just we all knew each other, so if someone was sick you'd play, you know, if someone didn't turn up you'd play. So I played with a lot of bands in Skiffle. Then I got with Rory. I auditioned for Rory, which is interesting because him and later on the Beatles thought the same thing. When I auditioned for Rory, of course, I was still in my black drape and my hair back and how you doing, looking a bit rough, you know. So they were a bit insecure about me, but I auditioned for him, and so I got the job because I was a good player. And when I went with Rory, then we were playing rock and roll, and we played the Cavern with Rory. We were the first group to play rock and roll, and we got thrown off the Cavern because we had our lead guitarist had a radio, used to plug his guitar into. It was the first amp around. It was a radio. I mean, you know, it's rough days in those days.
You were the first rock group to play the Cavern.
Yeah. And later on, when we went professional, as it were, I stopped work at 20 and went to Butlin's holiday camp to play in the Rock and Calypso, they called it, for £20 a week, $50 a week. But it was professional, so I gave up the job and went professional. But when we were getting ready to go, and we had the suits and everything, the shoes to match, you know, we used to do all that stuff. No, it was shoes in those days, black and white shoes and red suits, red ties, and great, and a hanky to match, you know, all that stuff. Like the bands here they all used to be in uniforms, you know, in the early rock days. And there was a club there, a coffee bar. We went down for coffee. And downstairs they used to, usually every night they had a steel band. But we went down this afternoon and there was John and Paul, and they were teaching Stuart Sutcliffe how to play bass. So that's how loose it was for them. I mean, we were the professionals and they were just the boys, you know, this struggling artists in those days. And we knew them hello that's all. We didn't, know them. It was just, oh, hi, from Liverpool, in a band, hi. And so we went away to play, and we'd come back to Liverpool, and then while we were doing this, because we did it for 2 years, then we went to Germany. So I used to get drunk, and I like sad songs when I'm drunk, That's why I like country, I think. So I'd go into the club. If it ended up that we both played the same club in Germany, the Beatles and Rory. So besides one night we smashed up the stage between us because it was heavy competition. And there'd be a lot of rivalry going on. I'd end up, if they had the last set, I'd be sitting there saying, play so-and-so, which is like this slow songs all the time.
Melancholy Baby.
I only found this out later. They were always worried about me because here I am in my black trape again, my hair up, and looking crazy. So they went through the same scene. They're saying, John will tell you that story. God, we didn't know what was happening. Just sitting there asking for these sad songs. It really looked hard, at the sideboards and that. Because I don't particularly think I've got a hard-looking face, but, they used to be a bit worried about it. So they'd play for me. They'd play me.
Play it, mate.
Yeah, they want a slow song, brother. And
What kind of stuff would
it's now you've put me on the spot. I can't think of one of them.
Because when people get drunk,
It was in their repertoire.
It was in their repertoire.
Yeah. Oh, they knew the songs. It was one great one of Elvis's that was really slow that they used to do.
Fools such as I, that kind of stuff.
I don't think they ever did that. Well, it's that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what it is. And they were all a bit worried. So then when we got back to Liverpool, I was just in bed one afternoon, because we were up all night, like we are now, and sleep all day. Brian Epstein came up. He says, "Will you sit in with the Beatles? Pete isn't well,
Pete Best.
Yeah. So I said, yeah, okay. So I got up and he had his big car, drove me down there, and I played that afternoon. Then they had a show at Southport that evening, so we played the afternoon session. We went to this Crocodile Club, something like that it was called. Stayed there all afternoon getting crazy, mainly just drinking those days. And then we drove off to Southport and did the show, and it was very nice. There's your money, but we got to know each other a bit, because when you're playing, it's different getting to know people from getting to know shaking hands and sitting with them. So then every time Pete sort of wasn't well, I can't say too much. He in those days, he used to sue me when I said he was sick. I'd sit in, and then gradually we formed this friendship, and then I was away. I mean, we talked about me joining vaguely, but it was like, well, would you like to? Yeah, I'd like to. They were the only band I'd go and watch, in Liverpool. In fact, we all used to play the same place, though. There's 4 bands on the bill. They were on the bill. I was on the bill, with my band, someone else. But I'd just go and watch them because they were the best band in Liverpool. I'd love to get them, and I played with them, and it was always great to play with them, So I'd love to get in this band. So we would, sit in some club somewhere, talk about it. I say, well, if we get it together, I'd love it, So then I got this call from Brian, and we were playing at this holiday camp again. He called Tuesday or Wednesday. He says, right, we'd like you to join the group. Can you come tonight? I said, no, I can't do that. I can't leave this band, without a drummer, they'd lose the gig. They got another 6 weeks to go on the gig, so you couldn't just leave. So I said, no, I'll be there Saturday. And I arrived Saturday, and that's when the riot started, because in Liverpool it was fine while I sat in, because Pete had a good following, he looked like Jeff Chandler in a fit. Sorry, Keith.
Jeff Chandler?
Yeah, he was a bit Jeff Chandler, broad and moody, this big hair thing. So he was the Jeff Chandler of Liverpool, anyway. And but when I got up that night, when I joined, there were riots.
This was the very first night.
Yeah, when I would join the band.
Right.
When I gigged with the band, it was fine.
But
when
word
I
had
joined,
gotten out that
I joined, Pete's out the band. It was big news in Liverpool. You don't imagine how big they were in Liverpool then. Not the world, but just Liverpool was like the world. It was like the monstro move of a lifetime. How dare they throw Pete out? But it was because I was well known there. Half of the audience were for me. There was 2 chants going up: Pete forever, Ringo never. Ringo forever, Pete never. So there was these chants going. We're trying to play, all this stuff going on. And then George got a black eye. Some guy punched him. because I joined the band. You know, can you imagine someone punching him because I joined? You know, you let him in the group, boom. So, and he was the main instigator anyway, George, for getting me in because he liked me playing. He's not a bad guitarist either.
It's important. I just want to underline this point because it's something that we've covered in interviews with John and George. That when I talked to John about the fame later on, he would always say to me, "You've got to understand that we were famous when we were in Liverpool.
That's what I'm telling you.
That was the microcosm of the experience. That
right.
What happened later was an extrapolation of.
It was just got bigger. That's all.
But that the real experience, the phenomena that became the Beatles, the first night that you were playing drums was the whole trip.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was saying. They were so big. I mean, you had such craziness going on over this band in Liverpool. It was like the Queen had committed suicide, you know. I mean, you know, you can imagine how big that would be. Well, just in Liverpool, which was our world then, it was so big. I mean, you know, it was all we did was get more countries, you know. We never got any sort of bigger, you know what I'm trying to say. I mean,
it was complete then.
Right.
The rest of the world would just get wind of what was going on there.
Right, but it just got, the situation was in Liverpool. The being big, or, you know, big and famous was in Liverpool. All it did, suddenly got England, then it got Europe, then it got America, then it was like the world, you know, but it was the same experience, just being expanded all the time. When the little atom was Liverpool, you know, then we started expanding.
When the four of you were on the stage that night, and you were playing the first gig, in your ear, did it sound like you were doing something revolutionary, something extraordinarily different, something unusual, something phenomenal?
No.
What was the
it just felt great. I didn't think it was revolutionary or, you know, anything like that. It just was a great band to be in, and it was a good time playing in that band.
When you played it?
We were doing a lot of songs that no one else was doing, but I don't think I ever thought, well, we're doing such a move on the other side compared to anyone else. We were just doing a lot of different stuff, and also they were writing then, and that was really freaky in those days, you know, doing the songs that the band had actually written. We didn't do many, we did about 2 or 3 at the most in those days.
What were the songs you were doing then, before the Lennon-McCartney compositions? What would be early?
I don't know, I'd have to look for an old list. We were doing a Shot of Rhythm and Blues, Henry VIII I Am, I was doing Boys, even doing Till There Was You in those days. Mm-hmm. Long Tall Sally, You Better Move On. Did we do a Better Move On? One of those, there was so many. Chains, but, you know, just mainly for England, they were semi-obscure records. You know, even when we went out of Liverpool, you know, to the down south, more or less, not to London, but, you know, the crazy places between Liverpool and London, they used to laugh at us. They couldn't understand this stomping music and these weird songs, you know, Shot of Rhythm and Blues and stuff, because they were used to Cliff and the Shadows and these other this other type of music, you know. And we came out there, and I remember audiences would laugh at us. They thought we were a joke. But they got into it fast enough.
You went from Liverpool on to Hamburg. You went to Hamburg primarily because that's where
the bread was.
That's where the bread was. And the bread was mainly in the hands of American GIs, American sailors, in Europe for the first time, spending American bucks.
Well, I don't know. We got it from the club owner.
He got it from the...
You know, the people used to buy your drinks, that's all. We never used to get tips in money, you know, when we were playing, if that's what you're saying. There was a lot of money in Germany, and therefore the club was always mainly Germans. You know, there wasn't such a big scene with American, or in England in those days had a lot of soldiers there. They'd come in occasionally, and boats, you know, ports or sailors would come in. But the majority of the audience was young, from sort of 15 to 25 Hamburgians, whatever they're called.
You went from Hamburg back and forth between Hamburg and Liverpool and on and on. And then there was the night that it was suggested that it was time to do the first album. The first album...
Well, it wasn't suggested. Brian had begged for months. I mean, he begged before I joined. They'd done these demos which he took around. And, you know, he'd been begging, and I joined, and he was still begging. And then suddenly he found Dick James, who turned him on to George Martin, who'd give us a chance. You know, he would do a record, he listened to the tapes, and he thought they had something. I don't think he liked Peters, the drummer, which is no offence, because when I got down there, he had another drummer, and he didn't like me either. Mm-hmm. So, but he sort of liked what they did. Then they tried to get us to do someone else's song. And mainly John and Paul were adamant that they wanted to do their own song. I mean, I wasn't even going to play on this session, but I would have preferred to mime to one of their songs than one of ours, or learn it later to play on stage, you know. And so they held out. Well, we all held out in a way, but they held out the more, because they were running the band then. And so we did Love Me Do, which was their song. And this guy, Andy White, is on the single, and I'm on the album. Because I did it on the album. It was not hard to play. But I think we freaked George out, because we did this like audition of about 7 or 8 numbers before we recorded, and we did Please Please Me, and I was playing the bass drum, the hi-hat, a tambourine, a maraca. I had a tambourine in one and a maraca in another, and I was hitting the cymbals as well. So he thought, there's some crazy man here. So he thought it was just some sort of weird leper, you know, spastic leper or something, trying to play all these instruments at once within the track. So he decided to get a professional drummer in, you know, for the day, because we don't know what this man's going to do. I don't know what went to. I've never talked to him about it. We've kidded about it, but I've never seriously asked him what did he think was happening
great to get his impression.
When I came down with this handful of junk, you know, playing all these things and hitting the cymbal with a maraca, you know. Now I can see him. Oh dear, let's get out of here. So, and then from then on, of course, I played with the band. And the first record, Love Me Do, for me, I don't know if you've asked John and George, and you'll tell me later, that was more important than anything else. That first piece of plastic, you don't believe how great that was. Okay. And it got to, 206 in the charts or something. And it did nothing here. 3 records did nothing here. But it would move. It got to 54, something like that. And they all thought we were buying it in Liverpool, because the whole of Liverpool went out and bought it en masse, you know. Not just the kids, everyone, because they were proud, a group from Liverpool, you know. It was fantastic, you know. There's a lot of that in Liverpool. They're very close. So every time this record moved the place, we'd have a dinner. We'd have a big celebration dinner, you know. We were getting 25, 30 quid a week then, but Brian said, we go off at dinner, yeah. And we all got very fat. But it was exciting. That and the first number 1.
Which was?
Please Please Me. Went to number 1, and we had three numbers. We were doing a tour with a girl called Helen Shapiro, and we were opening the bill for her. And suddenly the crowds were coming in. We'd do 3 numbers, and they'd all leave. And she was starting to freak out, and we had a good time. And then, of course, next time we were top of the bill. But
you talk with great excitement about the first disc.
Oh, I do. It was marvelous. I mean, it was so wonderful. Piece of plastic. I mean, look at your name on it. Parlophone. I mean, Parlophone I wasn't too pleased with. It was like the worst label you could be on. But shit, we were on a record, you know. That's great excitement to me.
You remember the first time you heard it on the radio?
We were in a car.
All of you?
Several of us. We were always together. We were in a car. No, it's not I think we were in a car in Soho is one recollection. I don't, because, you got to imagine every time it was played or moved a spot, we had a lunch. This thing went on for 6 months, man. Even if it went down, we'd celebrate. Yeah, moved anywhere. Yeah, let's have dinner. I think we did a show. EMI used to buy time on Luxembourg. And we went down and mimed to it. They used to have like 50 kids in this like room, but it was a live sort of disco radio show. And I think that's the first time it was ever on radio.
Radio Luxembourg.
Radio Luxembourg, yeah.
You recall the show? Because those shows had names
and
special hosts.
No, it was like the EMI show, I don't know. In those days, Decca would have, 6, 10 hours a week. EMI had 10 hours a week. Philips would have so many hours. It's not like that now, but record companies would buy time and put shows on and just play their records.
That led to the first album. The album known in America as Introducing the Beatles. Yeah. And the album that...
Well, the first album, after the single, and we were touring and playing clubs, dance halls. We were playing anywhere because, Brian was booking us up, and even when we had the number 1, we were still playing dates we'd committed to. Even the second number one, we were still playing sort of ballrooms because we'd committed to it before we'd made it, you know, because you'd say, oh, January, you'd book us for November somewhere, you know, you get a date. So we fulfilled all our commitments, even didn't matter how many number ones we had. We suddenly end up, you know, from touring top of the bill with Roy Orbison and Trini Lopez or something like that, we'd be playing this little jive-arse dance hall, you know, but it was good fun. Because it was booked. We didn't cancel anything, you know, like a lot of bands do now. Suddenly they're making the, no, I'm not doing that anymore, which I think is silly, because it's good in that transition period to not only do the big goals, but to keep getting back to where you've just come from. And you can relax more, you know. It's the excitement on the stage.
You mentioned two names that you were touring with now. You were Roy Orbison and Trini Lopez. Now,
not Trini Lopez, sorry, Chris Montez.
Ah, Chris Montez. You didn't tour with Trini Lopez?
No, we played with Trini in Paris.
And is this when he first had his hits with Lemon Tree?
If I had a hammer, ding, ding, I'd sing it in the morning,
the
ding,
Peter, Paul and Mary repertoire.
Yeah.
When
Mind you, I had a hammer. He probably did that a year before we played it with him, but that was always Trini's biggie for me. If I had a hammer.
I'd hammer in the morning.
I want to hammer around here, Trini.
Roy Orbison and Trini Lopez. Any other names come to mind?
Tommy Rowe.
Yeah.
Tommy Rowe. English acts, Matt Monroe, Kenny Lynch. The first one was Helen Shapiro.
Would we know her here? Excuse me, Helen, I don't.
No. She was about 1960. She had a few hits, and one doesn't come to mind I can think of.
You did the album, the first album.
Well, that's what I was getting to. We were doing all this playing all over the road, you know. And they said, well, you can do an album now. So we went in and we did the album in 12 hours. Because we did everything we've been doing on the road for the last year or so, you know.
The entire album, 12 hours.
Yeah, and Twist and Shout was the last one, and John really does it well, but he broke his throat doing it. You know, because it was the last one. And everyone just let it out, you know. So we did it in 12 hours. But it was easy because we'd done them, you know. We'd done them for years.
That album was released, and to say that the rest was history is
simple.
It's simple and true.
Right.
And it was. And after that, you were to become the most famous group in the history of the world and sell more records than any other group before or since.
Yeah.
Did you know at that time, when the album came out and when you heard that it was being played in America, and, I mean, at that point you must have had some
We had
idea.
a thing, where we going? To the top, Johnny. We had a thing. I mean, you see, it went in stages. I mean, I can't answer that question. You know, we did the first record. I mean, you thought, God, we're going to be big. I don't think no one can conceive, you know, that we were going to be as big as we were. My tiny brain wouldn't acknowledge it. I mean, I wanted to play the Palladium. That was big. Then we did the Palladium, that was over with. And then we did Europe, and that was great. And then America was freaky because, I mean, it's been in every magazine, radio show in the world. The story about George came to America to visit his sister and went round the shop saying, have you got any Beatles records?
1963.
You know, and they're saying, what? Get out of here. What are they, insects? All that crap, you know. So, and he came back. Because we had 3 records out here, did nothing. We had we had 2, one on Swan and one on VJ, and we did nothing. Of course, they did it after we did, I think I Won't Hold You, whichever was the big one here. Yeah. And he came back to me and said, oh, God, they don't know us, we're going to die, you know, it's going to be such a battle. Because we were used to, by then, of going places and being known, you know, so we weren't, we didn't have to pull the audience, they just came anyway, you know, we didn't have to do any crazy tricks to pull the audience, and they just came to see these loonies from Liverpool who were monsters in England, and then, consequently, all over Europe. So we'd go anywhere in Europe or England, and we'd have a full house. So we thought, well, yeah, but we go to America. The name of the game is to make it in America. It still is. That's the game in music. Doesn't matter if you're big in England, like Slade or Gary Glitter, all that. Mm-hmm. They want to make it here. They want to make it here. You know, America is the place because it's still the record. It's still Hollywood of the records. You know, it's still the movie capital. I don't care what they're saying. It's not the capital. It's still all the movie stars are here. You know. And it's the same with records. America's the place to do it. So, just by luck, I mean, I don't know. I always think there's 5 of us 4 and someone up there, you know, or out there, or in here, wherever. why we were booked on the Sullivan Show was because we came in from Sweden. It's only over the road from England, you know. It's like going next door. And we came in, there was about 10,000 kids around the airport waving us in. We'd only been away 2 days. And Ed Sullivan came in from New York at the same time, and he saw all these kids, you know. For whatever they say about Ed, he was bright enough to say, well, something's going on here. And he booked us for 2 TV shows, one in New York and one in Miami for 10 grand. It was 5 grand a piece. And just a little bit of knowledge, folks. We weren't always, you know, loaded. But we came, and we'd signed up to do the Ed Sullivan Show whenever it was. It was in the winter, I think. I remember having my overcoat on. And from the signing to when we should have done it, we'd signed with Capitol in America, and we'd made them promise they'd promote us, because the other record companies didn't promote, just put the records out, and you need promotion. Even to this day, you've got to get it out there, you know. So they swore they'd spend a small fortune. They spent, I think, $250,000 on promotion, which worked. And so the record took off, right? So the day we arrived, we're #1. So we get to America, and what's this? There's 20 billion kids out there again. We just, wow, it's fitting into place all the time, you know. We did the Sullivan Show, and that's, you know, where it goes from there. It just went on and on. We'd conquered America, folks.
A lot of people recall where they were the day that President Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah. And that was in a film, Night Moves, the other night. And for the life of me, I can't think.
Well,
I think... no, that was the Bay of Pigs one. I remember that more than him being shot. We were in some dressing room, and it was like the war's broken out. And we're sitting there, like, getting ready to go on stage somewhere in England. That was the freakier than him being shot. I can't honestly remember where I was when he was shot.
John said that you were all together in England, and that you were preparing to... The word was out that you were going to hear I Want to Hold Your Hand as being the #1 selection in England, and you were all around the radio because you would they got into number 5, number 4, number 3, number 2, and you were there and you were all ready, and that's when the bulletin came in.
They didn't play our record?
No, they went right to
You'd think you would have waited.
It is also interesting to note...
well, that could be true. I don't know.
That was John's record.
Fact. We were out of our brains.
A lot of people will recollect or remember where they were then, and a lot of people in America and perhaps around the world will remember where they... Well, certainly in America, will remember where they were when they first saw you on the Ed Sullivan Show. Those were 2 great media moments that a lot of people can just say, I remember being in the living room and this, that, and the other thing. In fact, when I was living in New York at the time, and this was in 2 points I want to make here. One was the fact that a lot of people have indicated that President Kennedy probably never heard the Beatles perform, to give you an idea of how long... Perform or play. Maybe never heard him on record. Give you an idea of how long it's been since he's been gone.
What was he into?
Yeah.
Does anyone know?
It's probably, if he had ever had his radio on in the car, he might, but it's been so long since he's been gone that he never heard the Beatles. In New York City, when you were on your airplane flying from London to the airport, which was then called, before Kennedy, it was, I forgot what it was called.
No, that's the other one.
Idlewild.
Idlewild.
On WYNS Radio, the #1 radio station in New York at the time.
Murray the K.
Murray the K was giving
10
updates.
cc wings.
Where they are, how many more miles left. The temperature, I have recordings at home of that. And literally in New York, the city stood still. There were 35, 40, 50,000 people at the airport.
On the aeroplane, I felt New York. It was like an octopus grabbing the plane, you know. There was like... I was just sitting on this plane. I could feel like tentacles coming up to the plane. It was so exciting, you know. And the first time in New York, you know,
it was bedlam.
It was exciting. I mean, we'd pulled big crowds and we'd had big airport reception. But of course, America was bigger than anywhere else in Europe, so therefore the crowds are bigger. So we got off the plane. I mean, we were used to 10, 12,000 people, you know, and that was a lot. And we got off Idlewild. I mean, there must have been 4 billion people out there. I mean, it was just crazy. It was fantastic. Then we got into all the way. We drove through. It was like, you know, the Royal Tour, this motorcade thing. But there was people lying in the route. Then we got to the hotel, and it was madness.
The Plaza Hotel.
Yeah, and they were all outside. There was barriers and horses and cops all over the place. And it was very exciting. It was great.
The New York Police Department now estimates that there were 250,000 people that lined the route from the airport to the hotel. It was the first time at the
Well, I
plaza.
told you it was more than 10,000.
It was big. I mean,
was big.
schools were closed down so kids could go out. I mean, traffic stopped in Fifth Avenue, Wall Street. The stock exchange closed earlier that day. It was it was the most incredible single cultural experience that had ever hit
Right.
anybody under 30.
And with
in-
4 of us sitting in the car giggling. Look.
I want that point of view. As all of that was going on outside.
We couldn't believe it. Well, I'll speak for everybody. We couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm looking at that car thinking, what's going on? Look at this. Can you believe this? I mean, that was the dialogue. It was like, shout, It was amazing. And the crowds,
Then the Ed Sullivan Show, then Miami, then back, then a tour.
Well, we did Washington in between.
Washington. And
That was weird. I mean, that was we got a train there with the press. You know the story about the press. They came to kill us.
Yes.
They came to kill us, but I mean, I think that's why we were lucky from Liverpool. And we weren't. The pop star image in England. I don't know about here. Was like milk drinking, non-smoking.
Yes, Pat.
High. So we get in this press conference. And I had in those days a scotch and coke and a ciggy. Smoking and drinking. So this gang of press and heavy press, I mean, hardliners came up there shouting at us. And so we shouted back because that's how we are, and suddenly they, it gets a, hey, what's the thing you do with that haircut, it's piss off. And the guy goes, oh, what's going on here, because if it had been, one of the milk drinkers, it'd been, excuse me, sir, I don't like your language, or whatever, they'd get some dumb-ass answer. So we just shouted back. And so I only found this out later, But if you look at the footage, you'll see us shouting back. No one's topping me, babe, we just get you right back there. Because we always work best when the audience were, the press conferences we did all the time, they'd shout at us. And we'd just get it off. It was, the Marx Brothers again. It didn't matter. If I was tired, the other 3 would do it. If Paul was tired, the 3 of us would do it. Well, we'd always take over, If the 4 of us were bright, we'd all do it. So this thing was going bounce, 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 and we only found out later we'd gotten this train to go to Washington. And the press came too, and I was sitting around with them, and they were telling me, they were saying, we came out to kill you, and you were shouting at us, as much as we were shouting at you, and then they got to love us, And that's how it happened. If we'd have stood there, like, shaking, if we'd have been from, say, another city or, another type of band, we would have been destroyed in this country. We'd have been finished, I think. They could have destroyed us. But we just shouted at them. They knew they've got something going now.
By the time the Beatles came to America, they couldn't perform live anymore.
That's the truth. We had 12 songs, roughly just over 25 minutes was our act. And if we didn't like the place, we would do everything fast and get out in 20.
20 is the fastest. You're up.
You'd do them all just a bit up-tempo. Of course, we did them slow some nights if we were tired, and that would go to 31. Because of England, Europe, then the start of America, where, it's the great truth, no one heard us. Not even ourselves. I found it very hard. If you look at any footage, I'm looking at amplifiers thinking the sound's going to come through my eyes instead of my ears, but it's like, direct your whole being to this amplifier to pick up something that's going on so I can hear. Because we went out, because of the noise, because we went out with very small amps and the house PA. You look at a band now, they're carrying 3 articulated trucks of equipment, putting out 2 billion watts, So... Hello, Spook. That's our cat meowing on your tape, folks. So, we were turned into very bad musicians purely because I couldn't do any fills, because I'm just there going back, just to hold it together somehow, So if ever I got off for a fill, which isn't as loud as all your force on an offbeat, it would get lost anyway, and the timing usually went all to cock, it'd start going crazy because not only trying to get back in on time, but then the guitars would lose what was going on, and so then we'd have like 2 bars to find out where we are again. And that's why we were bad players. And so this was going on, and we all knew it. And so it went on and on. Besides, they couldn't hear us, but sometimes to keep ourselves amused, I would play Love Me Do like a rumba or something, you know, which no one ever knew. I mean, we just knew that as a band. We used to do tricks for each other to keep us alive. Sometimes you got very tired, and, you know, the audience will always love the audience, you know, it's not bullshit. I mean, I loved the audience all the time. They were great. And I loved them freaking out, but sometimes, you know, I wanted to have a laugh myself, and I would play it like a rumba or a samba or, you know, something crazy.
How would Love Me Do work as a rumba?
Not very well. You know. And there was a lot of tricks like that. There was a lot of funny things on the road, you know, touring. I came in with the highest scream in the house one night, and the other three looked at me as if I'd gone insane. And then in Indianapolis, where they have the race.
The Indianapolis Speedway.
Right, so besides driving around there in the police car, the police were always very nice in those days. They weren't pigs. They were very nice. I was driving this cop car around the racecourse, and we got chased by another cop car. I mean, there was a lot of fun things going on as well. So I happened to have stayed up for 3 days and nights, which is probably the longest I've ever stayed up to this day was 3 days and nights. And we got on stage, and I was very slow. To say the least, I was slow. So Paul would go, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go, duh, 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 duh. You know, what? You know, so, and I'm going, come on, buddy, speed up, no way. And then it frightened me because my leg, the bass drum leg, went independent. It just started flapping about all over the place, flap, flap, flap. So it frightened me a bit. But, I mean, there was funny things like that. It's funny now. At the time, I freaked out. Oh, God, what's happened to me? You know, just your leg. I mean, if you can imagine your leg just jumping up and down on its own accord, no control. But it was fun on stage. I mean, it's fun to look back on, to think I actually went on the stage and with a loose leg. And there was, you know, they've had their own funniness going on, you know. That's when we decided to stop in 66. Everyone thought we toured for years, you know, but we didn't. I joined in 62 and we'd finished touring in 66 to go into the studio where we could hear each other and create any fantasy that came out of anybody's brain.
We're going to roll in here a bootleg recording of the Hollywood Bowl concert that'll be creeping up under what you're about to tell us. When you played the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles, which was a major event in California, any specific recollections of that gig, or was it...
Of the gig? No. See, the events were starting to become everything that went around the playing. The playing was something we did. And, you know, there was big audiences, and like Shay, that was just a massive audience, but on stage was getting to be the fun thing, what we were doing. I mean, if you look at the footage of Shay with John's like a loony playing the electric piano or organ with his elbows, and we had to overdub most of it anyway, the sound. When we got to here, I mean, it was amazing. We had this monstro house, and it was sunshine. And
Bel Air.
Bel Air, yes, right. So, and, you know, meeting Elvis, and then we were around this house.
Tell that story again.
Meeting Elvis?
Yeah.
The first time I met Elvis.
That story always worked.
He was, it was very weird. He was the king, and he turned my head around. I always thank him for being born, you know, because I was into Johnny Ray, which I loved. He always made me cry with Little White Cloud That Cried. I was always a crier. Christ, I whinge over anything. Yeah. So then Elvis came out, and he was like the first teenager rock and roller for me. Because Bill Haley, I loved Bill Haley, but he was always like your dad, you know. But he played good music, so all the rockers seemed to be a bit like your dad. Elvis was sort of the first teenagers, you know, besides Frankie Lyman that got into all that. But Elvis was the biggie, right? Yep. And he was a teenager, and all the great stories where he was... you know, they wouldn't show him on the Sullivan Show below the waist, which was a drag. I went to see him in Vegas and thought he was stiff as a board. But the other one, this great meet, so it's the Fab Four meet Elv. And, you know, we're all a bit nervous, you know, you get a bit edgy. And he probably was a bit edgy. So we go in, he always had these football players with him. I never understood that.
Bodyguards.
Well, no, bodyguards and football. They're always playing football, you know. I'd say, why isn't he playing music? You know, what's he doing playing football again? So we walk in, and he's playing bass to the television.
What was on the television?
Well, I don't know, you know, Dragnet or something. I don't know what was on, some program. It wasn't, you know, a musical show. I remember that. And I mean, I remember going through this weirdness. Hello, he's playing bass to the television. You know, But it's probably just a way of him getting out of his nervousness. I don't know. But that was always a story that stuck in my mind. Not a story, an incident.
Do you remember talking with him at all, the first meeting up in Bel Air?
I don't remember too much of the dialogue. Hi, you know, hello, yeah, it's good to meet you, loved your early records. Colonel Tom gave us a covered wagon that was a lamp.
That was it?
And then we got all Elvis's records. I love Colonel Tom, he's a man you should talk to. He'll tell you stories that'll blow your brain, which I won't repeat here.
I might just also add that recently, about a year ago, I interviewed Priscilla Presley, Elvis's wife, and she recalls Elvis's point of view of that same meeting because I asked her what it was like in the house.
Well, then tell me on your tape.
Well, briefly, because you were just living down the block from him in Bel Air. I forgot the name of the street, and the word had come up to the house that the four of you were on your way up, and he was scared to death. Scared to death. He was just... He was not sitting in front of the television playing bass when he got the word, and he just didn't know what to do, where to receive all of you. What am I going to say to them? Priscilla said that he was concerned that maybe he wouldn't understand the way you spoke because the accent was...
We are Arabs.
Well, so finally when you arrived, it was overwhelming to him, and when you left, he was just a wreck because to him it was not 4 against 1 isn't fair. You know?
Yes, I was going to say that. We were always lucky because there was 4 of us. So we always mainly outnumbered anyone we met, you know. So we had each other to rely on, you know, for security blankets around us. What did she say he was playing bass?
Not before you would arrive.
No, was he playing bass when I arrived?
Yes.
Yeah, he was. Good. I thought I was going crazy.
No, he was there doing that.
Yeah.
Just before we leave, Elvis.
Did she remember the program? The $200, Priscilla. What program was it?
Before we leave, Elvis, if the Beatles were the most phenomenal group in the history of the world, Elvis certainly was the most incredible single act in the history of the world.
Yes, still is.
Do you still have the same reverence for him now? I go to the Hilton and see him in Vegas.
No, I only went once. As I said, he disappointed me. He was great. I mean, it was still, I'm looking at, you know, as people look at us, I'm looking at my myth, you know, I'm looking at Elvis. And I don't want to see him again, really. No. I've seen him and I've covered it. I never really liked him after sort of 59.
When the movie, after the Army.
Well, before the Army. When did he go in? 58 he went in the Army?
Yeah, when he came out he started doing the
Well, just before he went in he started slowing down. He wasn't a rocker anymore. He was turning into a cabaret act, you know. Right. For me personally, you know, I liked all his rock stuff. All his early stuff was amazing. Then he did that first movie, Love Me Tender. Yeah. That was great. And then after that it went downhill. Jailhouse Rock was good. Yeah, so Jailhouse Rock. After Jailhouse Rock, it went downhill for me. So, I don't want to see him again. You know.
Was he the most significant musical force in your life?
No, there was lots. Gene Autry was the most. It may sound like a joke. Go and have a look in my bedroom. It's covered with Gene Autry posters and pictures.
Gene Autry
he was my first musical influence. He sent shivers down my spine when he put his leg over the horn on the saddle and sang South of the Border, Down Mexico Way in a movie, right?
No, you're not
I'm not putting you on. Honestly,
because Johnny Ray, I was right with you on The White Cloud That Cried.
Well, I was into it before. I never had records or anything, but I'd go to the movies all the time, right?
Gene Autry on Champion?
On Champion, he sang South of the Border. He had 3 guys behind him, Mexicans, going, ay, 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 ay. And I was going, oh, look at him, and he's playing, he's got his leg over the, you know, the horn of the saddle thing, and he's singing this song, man. It freaked me out. It's my I don't even know what age I was. Probably 8. It must have been in between hospitals. It was fantastic. I loved it. And that sticks in my brain. My first musical experience was that. I mean, I'd heard music before, but that one is my biggie. Then I got it. Johnny Ray, you know, and Perry Comos and all them, you know, they were around in sort of 54-ish. 50, yeah, but they started about 54, I think. But Bill Haley was out in 54.
54.
Well, whenever they were around, Johnny Ray came to Liverpool, which again I can see, I think it helped. I could see why kids were doing what they were doing because we were around. Because I did a lot of them when other people were around. When Johnny Ray played Liverpool, he sat on top of the Adelphi Hotel and waved. And I'm there saying, oh, he's waving at me. Look at that. Hi, Johnny. So, of course, he wasn't. There was like 40 people down there. There wasn't big crowds in those days. And then I saw him in a restaurant in Liverpool, and I always remember it. I'm looking in this window. think that must have been 55-ish, late 55.
I'll fix up the
It doesn't
dates.
matter anyway.
It does.
I mean, they all get mingled, you know. They all get meshed into one. So he's eating in this restaurant. I look in this window and I honestly, consciously remember going through. He's eating like a real person. you know, it's like, oh yeah, look at that. He's eating. I mean, you know, it's just like us, you know. Of course he's like us, but I just remember this flash. And so when people would say, oh, look, you're eating or you're breathing just like a human, you know, I always flashed on me doing it so many years ago, you know, so I could see him doing it, saying, yes, I eat just like everyone else, you know. Sorry to disappoint you.
After the touring, after all of the insanity, the first 10, 15, 20 million records, I Want to Hold Your Hand, the last time I checked in was 6.5 million singles, the largest selling Beatles single.
You know how many we've sold altogether?
The last time I checked in, about 2 months ago, was 400 million items.
Really? Last time I checked, it must have been 6 years ago, it was only 250 million.
Oh, it's over 400 million as of last month.
Buy myself a new swimming pool.
You know what the number one album was, by the way?
Ours?
Yeah.
No. Rubber Soul?
No.
I have one more guess, right? Late or early?
Late.
Well, if there was any sense in the world, it would be Abbey Road.
It was.
Oh, was it?
And
Because
the single largest selling
so
Beatle
it should be. That's my fave. That
Is Abbey your favorite Beatle?
the second side of Abbey Road is my favourite. I love it. The bathroom window and all those bits, they weren't songs. I mean, they were just all the bits that John and Paul had around that we roped together, you know. And also, it's a great. I got the kit I still use to this day, and I got skins and got rid of plastic heads, so it's very large in my memory.
And
I
the
love that
Publics.
piece. And the White Album is important to me for different reasons. One, I left the band on the White Album because I couldn't take it. It's a great funny story, right? We're doing this album and I'm getting weird, right? So, you know, I'm going through crazy head jobs, right? So I'm sitting around and I've got to leave, right? You know, I'm talking, this is to myself, you know, I'm talking to myself, you know, I've got to leave this band, it's not working, you know. So I go round to John, he's like, yo, knock, knock. I said, John, listen, you know, it's not working. You three are really fine. I feel out of it, you know, I don't feel it's any, you know, I'm any good to the band. And he said, I thought it was you three. I was like, oh, what? So I went, okay. Then I went round to Paul. I mean, I'm still checking it out, right? After he'd said, I thought it was you three, so I go round to Paul. Listen, I'm leaving the band, you know, we're not getting on. You three are really getting it together, and I feel like, you know, I'm out of it, not doing anything. He says, I thought it was you three. So, shit, this is crazy. We're all going through it, are we? So I just said, okay, well, I'm going on holiday, and I went away for 2 weeks, and that's when I left the band. And then I got a telegram from John. So, some great drums or whatever, you know, on the tracks we'd done. And they came back and it was great because George had set up all these flowers all over the studio saying welcome home, you know. So and then we got it together again. And the White Album was important also because it was more like a band album. See, I never really liked Sgt. Pepper.
You didn't?
I mean, I think it's a fine album, you know. I mean, it is a fine album and all the work we do is fine, but I think I felt like a session man on it. Because we put so much on it, you know, all the, you know, the strings and the concept and the brass, and you'd sit around the studio for days, you know, we're overdubbing other things. So I always felt, well, it was better on the White one for me. We were more like a band, a little group, you know, and I enjoyed the group feel. So I mean, people keep saying, "Oh, Sgt. Pepper." It's a fine album, but just for me emotionally, I prefer Abbey Road and a lot of the White Album, and the early albums for different reasons. You know, this was later on.
You are aware of the fact that according to Rolling Stone magazine and the rock critics and the rest of it, Sgt. Pepper is considered the greatest single rock album ever produced.
In the world. Yes, I do.
But you do not acknowledge that.
Yes, I do. It is. It's fine. You know, it's a great album. I'm not putting the album down. Just our relationships. You see, you have to think. I don't just look at it, listen to the record. I'm going through what our relationships were at the time. You know, and they changed all the time. And I felt our relationship was better on the White Album and definitely on Abbey Road.
According to George, according to John, it was all over by Let It Be. By the time Let It Be was being filmed and recorded, according to George and according to John, they
it was.
That
Yeah,
was
but
it.
that's because George left. George left on Let It Be. We were very possessive of each other, you know. The four of us had been through a lot together, and we were very close most of the time. We weren't close all the time. And it went round, you know, I'd be close with John, I'd be close with George, I'd be close with Paul, they'd be close, John and I and George would be close, Paul, John and George would be, you know, it went round in a lot of circles. But most of the time, four of us were very close, and I don't know, I thought we were very possessive of each other in a way, you know, not like, you know, a mother-son thing, you know, but just with ourselves. And we didn't like strangers coming in too much. And the wives and the girlfriends never came to the studio. That was where we were together. And I think that's why we worked so well, because there was just the four of us, and there was no outside influence, unless we brought it in, like, you know, someone to come down and play on it, or Mick had flash past for an hour or so because he had nothing to do or whatever, you know, those things. But basically it was just the four of us recording, and it was intense, you know, and dramatic, and we were trying to get the record done the best we could. We'd do one track for a week, you know. It takes a week to do one track, just the backing track sometimes. So we all got a bit weird, and you know, I was wondering what was happening one day. So I was saying to John, you know, what is going on here? You know, you're always together all the time, you know, it's freaking me out a bit. What's happening? And he told me what they were trying to do. It's nothing to do with you, the listening public. But he told me what they were doing, so then I was fine after that. I thought, oh, well, okay, I mean, that's how he wants to do it, you know, that's fine with me. And then I sort of relaxed a lot around Yoko. I think she's hysterical. I played on an album with her. I think that's one of them. Also, I think the other one is that George was getting a lot of independence for himself in those days. He was writing more, he wanted things to go his way, where when we first started, they basically went John and Paul's way, you know, because they were the writers, and they'd say, you know, this is the song. I would play as creatively as I could, and they would say, can you do this? But sometimes I'd have three people telling me how to do it, and I'd play it the only way I could, and it seemed to work, you know, because the three frustrated drummers I used to have in my band, or in the band, because they all wanted to play drums, and I couldn't play guitar, so it didn't matter. And I think that really helped me play in a way, because they all... And I kept screaming, there's two drummers, you know, they're saying, play this, like on that track, I'm saying, for Christ's sake, there's two drums there. They could never hear that, you know, they just hear some drum thing going on. And so you'd have to have four arms to do half of the stuff they wanted me to do. So I would do it however I could. Anyway, back to George. And the other reason, I think Paul George was finding his independence, and he wouldn't be dominated as much by Paul as he was. Because Paul would, in the end, wanted to like point out the solo to George, and George was saying, "Well, I'm a guitarist. I'll play the solo," and he always did. You know, he always played fine solos for what our band was. You know, like I played for what our band was. John's the greatest rhythm guitarist still, and he plays lead in a crazy sort of way. I think that was another factor, because George left with a big row with Paul. Because Paul wanted to point out how to play, because it was his song, you see. I mean, he had sort of a right, but no right at all to do that, you know, to say, I wrote the song. It got a bit like, I wrote the song, I want it this way, where before it was, I want the song, give me what you can give me, you know, which that's how it was earlier on. So, and also, you know, well, we were all married by then, you know, the family, and everyone wanted to do different things, and I wanted to be in movies and stuff. I don't know. And, you know, as I said, with George writing a lot, so how many songs is he going to get? And then I started writing. I used to have one song, you know, then I wrote two. I would have liked two on, but it would have been a battle, you know, to get two of mine. And then because it doesn't matter what I've written today, I still haven't topped Lennon and McCartney. They wrote some fine songs. Fine songs. Not just because I was in the band and I was with them. They have written some incredible things, you know. We'd been together so long. We were living our own lives, you know. I think that I couldn't put my finger on one thing why we broke up. It was time, and we were spreading out, you know. Well, they were spreading out more than I was. I would have stayed with the band.
For you personally, at that point, at the Let It Be album point, would you have been willing to give it a couple more years, or were you about ready to move on?
Well, it would have had to sorted itself out. As it was, even I wouldn't have gone on with it.
At that point, at Let It Be, you were ready to go your own way too.
Yeah, because...
For the reasons you've explained and others that...
Because the other three were anyway, so what am I holding together? You know? But it would have been easier for me if we'd have come back to, like, the four of us situation, all for one, one for all, instead of all for, all for themselves. It was getting more all for us, for themselves, or ourselves. I include me as well. I wanted to do different things, but my move was minor compared to theirs.
But it's going to be such an incredible sort of comical thing, like in 50 years' time, They broke up because Yoko sat on an M. Oh, just something I did. What? You see, John kept bringing this girl along. What?